signaling through this, people versus profits type message that quite frankly he wants to take back without overusing that term, and really bring it back to talking about supporting people, supporting families, and start playing again for those votes. Whereas traditionally Conservatives, we've just kind of conceded those, and that those few ridings that we talk about that are a toss up between the NDP and the Conservatives are actually a path to forming government. There's enough seats in that exchange that if he can move those traditional worker voters back into the or into the Conservative camp, I wouldn't necessarily say back into, but into there.
I mean, it's outreach to a rank and file. It's outreach to a rank and file union member, by the sounds of things, right?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Okay, Cam. Very quickly, what do you think?
Well, it's interesting. During my teaching career, I spent 2.5 years actually teaching in Bowmanville, and to me, when I hear that, it played very much into what I know of the area, of that kind of blue collar, center left kind of person who does work in the auto plant and whatnot, and it fits that mold. The problem is again, this is where it's kind of becoming a bit of a mixed message. Aaron O'Toole attacks a trade deal with China that he was in a cabinet that approved, So it's hard to kind of get past the dissonance. But what I will say is this, that this is a strategy that's been used by conservative movements around the world. We saw Nicolas Sarkozy rise to rise power in France doing this. We've seen it with Boris Johnson most recently in Britain, and yes, even Donald Trump pulled this one off in the States. And it's not something that the messaging does. Part of it works in that, yes, you know what? People are more about GDP than your bottom line in your community. I come from a forestry town where we saw a mill shut down and equipment shipped overseas to China because, frankly, it was more beneficial to the company than it ever was for the community. And so there's a lot of communities that can identify with that message. The problem is the solution. When you're talking about less big, getting big government out of the way, and not stopping industries. Well, you know what? The energy sector is going through a lot of problems, and a lot of them are not the making of government. They're the making of the market itself. And if you want to ignore that, fine, but you're not going to have a solution to the actual problem. And we've seen this already with the Ford Conservatives in Ontario, where when GM was shutting down, at first Doug Ford took his hands off and said, "Oh, market's at work. Sorry, guys, can't help you." And we see in Alberta where Jason Kenney's trying to roll back labor rights. If that's your quote-unquote solution to big government, then you're not going to win over a lot of votes. But I will say this, is that inside the labor movement, there is definitely a shift happening, and there is a pressure building because there are union workers, proud union workers,
who are saying, do you speak for me anymore?
Well, this is it.
Or do you speak for, and we'll have to stop here, but maybe we can pick this up. Do you represent, a guy like me or a woman like me? I go to work, and I carry a lunch box, and I wear a hard hat and safety boots to work, or do you speak for the downtown urban elites? I can see how there's a divide there. When we come back, Mr. O'Toole speaking right down to his caucus. We'll talk about Trudeau, the progressive agenda, and an activist government as well. It's a political fix on the Rob Snow Show, Rogers TV and 1310 News.
returns on 1310 News and Rogers TV.
Aaron O'Toole is addressing the Conservative caucus right now. Just a little bit of this.
Big nation and proud of a united Canada.
His father immigrated to Canada from Hong Kong after World War II. His father witnessed Canadian soldiers valiantly trying to defend Hong Kong more than half a century ago. He would be so proud to see his son serve as the Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs at a time when defending the rights of freedoms of Hong Kong is once again center stage for Canada.
Hi, Michael Chong. So that's the new Conservative leader, Aaron O'Toole. I think he's probably going to take some reporters' questions at some point after this caucus meeting, saying together we will form an engaged, compassionate Conservative government, ethical Conservative government as well. That's enough about Aaron O'Toole. It's the Political Fix. Andrew Brander here from Crestview, Cam Holmstrom from Blue Sky. Do Canadians, what's your sense of it, Andrew? Is Trudeau rolling the dice here by purporting to prepare for such an activist agenda with the throne speech in a couple of weeks' time?
I don't know if he's rolling the dice. I think it's more of a political calculation on that side, which is to the point Cam was making earlier. You know, Aaron is clearly steering the Conservative Party much more towards the center. So if I'm the Prime Minister and I'm watching this, I've determined that I can't exercise my old strategy of branding Aaron O'Toole as, some sort of crazy right-winger that doesn't, they can't connect with your values, and see the CPC shifting to the center, becoming electorally viable. Then you have to figure the Liberals are responding to that in shifting their voting bloc and base to the left and pushing them to go further towards that. I think it's most dangerous actually for Jagmeet Singh. I think a lot of people are saying, where is this guy? What's he doing? And why is he letting the Liberals come in and basically eat their lunch on a daily basis? Okay. And I think a lot of Canadians. The question is, a lot of Canadians who found themselves on these support programs that have basically become giant trials of be it basic income or livable wages, those types of policies. Whether Canadians are going to look at those and say, oh yeah, like I never actually thought that I'd need to be on this, but thank God it was there for me, and this is something that I'm comfortable with, voting for, even if it means decades upon decades to recover from.
Okay, what do you think? Is Trudeau misreading the mood, so to speak? What do you think? Are Canadians ready for an activist agenda, Cam?
To be honest, I don't think it's that much of a gamble given the circumstances for this particular reason. Because we are in danger. The thing is, we're in this dangerous moment. We're in this pandemic, but we don't know when the end's coming. So I think people are open-minded to the fact that we are in this situation that's going to involve government to step in, and there is no timeline on to how long that'll take. So I think that's kind of lowered some barriers. But the thing is, too, I think the government's risk is not that great because, frankly, they're following the lead of industry at this point. A lot of the things they're talking about are things that the market has sped up into because of this circumstance, whether it be investments in green energy or whatnot. They're already going there, and they've sped up in this moment. They've started to wind down certain investments, crank up others. So it's just as much a reaction to the market as it is anything else. When it comes to the political side of it too, for the Prime Minister, he gets to kind of have it both ways. Aaron O'Toole has not inoculated himself against usual attacks yet, and the Liberals will keep trying, and we'll land some punches. But at the same time, yes, he does get to try to eat Jagmeet Singh's lunch. But I'd point out, he doesn't get to eat his lunch if Jagmeet Singh actually gets credit for what's been delivered. And so far, a lot of what he's done, asked for, has been delivered upon, and he's getting it. And you're seeing the bump in his poll numbers over and over.
Well, where are the new sick days? Where are the new paid sick days?
let's see in the throne speech,
Okay.
TBA.
But it's a provincial thing, Cam, right?
I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
But they're also talking about how the EI program, how they're going to totally reinvent the EI, and it will include measures like that. The point being is that you're not going to get everything if you're Jagmeet Singh, but you get to take credit for all these things. And there's so many things that the Liberals are looking at right now that have been NDP planks for a long time. And that to me is the nice part of the situation for the Liberals. If they are happy to go to an election with this, clearly. If the other party decides to take them down, they're willing to go to the people and fight on this. But at the same time, they also know they've got a partner who's willing to help them push on this. So it's like there isn't a major downside for them in this moment. And it's a unique moment in that sense. But the only thing I would say that the danger comes in is that, again, is like how far is too far, how much is overreach. I think the sweet spot for Liberals has always been, the Conservatives are being too cold, the NDP is being too hot. We're right in this middle somewhere, right?
Okay, they're Goldilocks. Okay, look, we're almost right at a time, so just yes or no. Is there going to be an election this fall? Yes or no, Andrew?
If Aaron can start to move the ceiling, he doesn't need to over exceptionally perform to degrees where we're seeing.
Is there going to be an election this fall?
I think he won the leadership on convincing party members that we were going. I think if it isn't.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
On the next Simply Cooking by Chef, Daniela has some ideas for a date night at home.
I love to make what we called abundance boards. We're gonna have 2 savory boards and 1 dessert board. There's no rhyme or reason, there's no rules. It's literally about taking a whole bunch of different ingredients and making them into something that you love.
Join us for Simply Cooking by Chef right here on Rogers TV.
It isn't the heavy trays that make the job difficult, or the fast pace you need to keep up. It's not working another double because someone called in sick. What makes the job tough is the moment you realize a customer has had enough and you have to make that decision not to overserve. Refusing service isn't personal, it's the law. We know it's not easy, but we're counting on you to keep us all safe. Thank you, servers, for doing the tough job.
Each week on Grill This, Smoke That, Steph Legary showcases delicious recipes from across Canada, all done on the grill. Join Steph and his special guests on Grill This, Smoke That, Tuesdays at 9 p.m. on Rogers TV.
This is Rogers TV, Ottawa.
I'm just going to talk into this mic here, Arthur. You're getting that? Okay. Well, then it should be good then.
Can we have the mayor test as well?
Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. 1 2 3. Okay, apologize for the delay. We're back up on Rogers and YouTube. This meeting, as I mentioned, will be broadcast on Rogers TV. Members and staff are asked to position their cameras so that their faces are centered and as close to the top of the frame as possible. And phone-in participants, please do not put the phone on hold. Roll call, please, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Councillor Luloff?
Present.
Councillor Dudas?
Present.
Councillor Harder?
Here.
Councillor Suds?
Here.
Councillor El Shantiri?
Present.
Councillor Gower?
Here.
Councillor Kavanagh?
Here.
Councillor Shirelli?
Here.
Councillor Eglai?
Here.
Councillor Deans?
I'm back.
Councillor Tierney?
Present.
Conseil Fleury?
Ici. Welcome back, Diane.
Councillor King?
Here.
Councillor McKenney?
Present.
Councillor Leeper?
Here.
Councillor Brockington?
Here.
Councillor Menard?
Present.
Conseil Cloutier?
Here.
Councillor DeRoos?
Here.
Councillor Moffat?
Here.
Councillor Meehan?
I'm here. And hi, Diane. Good to see your face.
Councillor Hubley?
Here.
Mayor Watson?
Present. Ici.
You have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Merci. Confirmation of minutes, adoption de procès verbaux pour la réunion le 26 août 2020. Confirmation of minutes from August 26, 2020. Carried. Declaration of interest. Declaration of interest, including those originally arising from prior meetings. Déclaration de conflit d'intérêt. None. Communications.
Yes.
Sorry.
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Shirelli.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Regarding the City Council disposition 38 of August 26, 2020, the Council motion 38 4. Whereas subsection 5.3 of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act provides that where the interest of a member has not been disclosed by reason of a member's absence from a meeting at which the matter is considered, the member shall disclose the interest at the first meeting of council attended by the member. And whereas the Integrity Commissioner advised that even though his preliminary belief is that I do not have a pecuniary interest in the item, but since he feels that he must get further legal advice in the interim, I should declare a conflict of interest out of an abundance of caution. I, Councillor Rick Shirelli, declare a direct pecuniary interest in the following matter considered by Council on August 26, 2020. Motion 38-4 regarding a special grant to certain civic organizations.
Okay. Do you have to name what the organization is, Councillor?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Okay. Any other conflicts of interest? No. Communications as presented. Regrets? No regrets filed. Motion to introduce reports. Motion portant présentation de rapport. Councillor El Shantiri, please. Seconded by Councillor Eglai.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report 15, Finance and Economic Development Committee Report 16, Planning Committee Report 28, and Transportation Committee Report 10 be received and considered.
Carried? Carried?
Carried.
I'd I'd like to call upon our colleague and friend Councillor Deans, who is back after her courageous and gutsy battle against cancer, coming out a winner. And Councillor, we're delighted to have you back on council, and we'd like you to offer a few words, please.
Well, thank you, Mayor Watson, and hi, everyone. It's just great to be back at City Hall. I just can't tell you, it's been a tough year, and I have to tell you, when I walked out of the council chamber almost a year ago now, I paused and took a good look around because I knew I had a battle ahead of me probably greater than any battle I had ever fought in that council chamber. And you probably all remember I fought a few good battles in that council chamber. But I never walked the road alone, although it's been a very tough year for me. I've had my eye on the prize, which was getting back to serving the constituents in the city that I love. And I was always thinking about today, about getting back to work, and I'm just so grateful to be back. But certainly I didn't get here alone. I have the love and support of my family every step of the way, and my good friends who were very present in my life through this entire journey. And I have to say that we are so blessed in Ottawa to have the amazing healthcare professionals that we have in this city. And I have had a firsthand glimpse of that. And I can tell you that personally, my healthcare team was led by Dr. Michael Funkisong and the men and women at the Shirley Greenberg Women's Health Centre and the Ottawa Regional Cancer Center, and they gave me confidence and courage throughout the entire journey, and I will be eternally grateful to them for all of the work that they did. For the past 25 years, I've been showing up and standing up for the community, and through this cancer journey, my constituents in this city showed up and stood up for me, and I really felt in my heart that it made such a positive impact on me and such a big difference, and it gave me the courage to get through this battle. And I hope none of you ever have to go through it, because it's not a great battle, but you know, they say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and I'd like to think that I'm back stronger and ready to serve this city and make a difference every day that we have. I want to also thank each of you, because I didn't have the worry of, you know, that some people have of not being able to pay my bills throughout this journey. You gave me that help and support that I needed to get through this, and many of you, most of you, in fact, reached out to me many times, as did the city staff. So thanks to you, thanks to the city staff for your encouraging words and your support every step of the way. It really did make a huge difference. I also want to thank my personal staff, because they are very accomplished, and I think by and large they made the work in my constituency seamless, because they are so good at their jobs. And I want to give a special shout out to Councillors Brockington and Councillor Meehan, who filled in very aptly for me when we needed some political help in my ward. So thank you especially to the two of you for doing that. And I just wanted to say that all of us may not see eye to eye around the table, and that's fine. We don't have to see eye to eye all the time. But it's clear to me that we can come together. You all came together for me over the last year, and I think that council that is united is council that can best serve our constituents together. So I hope the rest of our time together, the next 2 years, we will dig deep and we will find ways to come together to work for our constituents and to lead in really challenging times. I never thought that my triumphant return to City Hall would be virtual, but that's the COVID world that we work in now, and we have to make the best of what we have. And so just a big thank you to all of you. Your support has meant the world to me, and I'm very excited to be back today. Thanks, Mayor Watson.
Thank you very much, Councillor Deans, and welcome back. Bienvenue. Councillor El-Shantiri has a brief statement. Councillor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and welcome back our colleagues, Councillor Dean. Mr. Mayor, let's speak a little bit about the anniversary of the BIAs in Ontario, which just happened to be next week, actually. But since we don't have a council next week, I thought I would share some messaging about the BIA. So I want to take a moment to share a big milestone anniversary for all BIAs. Next week is the 50th anniversary of the creation of BIAs in Ontario. 50 years ago, the first BIA was started in Toronto, Bloor West BIA. The first BIA in Ottawa was the Bank Street BIA, created in 1977. Today, there are more than 270 BIAs in Ontario, and in Ottawa, we have 19 BIAs across 13 wards, including urban, suburban, and rural. We all know the strong value BIAs bring to our local businesses and the importance they have on our local communities. They help create vibrance in our city for people to enjoy and help our economy and our small business thrive. Several years ago, it was wonderful when Ottawa BIAs come together to form the Ottawa Coalition of BIAs, OGO BIA, to share best practice and enhance their advocacy effort on behalf of their member businesses. Together, they represent more than 6,400 property owners and businesses who employ over 120,000 people and generate $250 million in municipal tax revenue. They collectively invest $7.4 million each year into our neighborhood. This includes things like on-street purification initiatives, marketing and promotional campaign, street festival, clean street campaign, and public safety initiative. Their contribution to making our city a better place is important, and their advice is appreciated. So to all our BIAs, congratulations on this milestone anniversary. And Mr. Mayor, I would like staff from Economic Development, I know they're on the call, to share the video created by the Barrhaven BIAs, and not so much because it's Barrhaven created, but the video itself speaks value of the city as a whole. How can we work together, rural and suburban and urban, and how we can promote our businesses. That video is really a piece of art. I congratulate the Barrhaven BIA for their video, and congratulations to all the BIAs in the city, and thanks for your support, Mr. Mayor, and your trust in me to represent the city in the last probably 10 or so years on BIA. Actually, it's more, but under your tenure, it's been 10 years anyway. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor, and we thank all of the volunteer board of directors of BIAs throughout the City of Ottawa and their executive directors for the great work they do representing their constituents. Well, good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Fall officially begins in just 2 weeks, and I know that everyone has been busy and somewhat anxious with the return back to school. I want to take another opportunity to formally welcome Councillor Deans, who is officially back with us today following her medical leave. Diane, as we know, is one of Council's longest-standing members, having served more than 25 years. I know that she has the love and support of her Council colleagues and the entire community, and we're thrilled that she is doing well and is back with us, unfortunately not in person, but virtually. Bienvenue, Conseillère Deans. Now, as you all know, due to COVID-19 pandemic, the city will maintain its declaration of emergency until at least the end of September. This will preserve a heightened level of vigilance and response capacity as kids return to school across the city. Students, parents, and educators are all adjusting to the new reality of a very different and very challenging school year. I want to acknowledge the tremendous efforts of teachers, administrators, support staff, and the entire community who are working together to ensure the safety and well-being of students and staff everywhere. This is also the right time to remind residents about safe driving and to be extra careful when driving in residential neighborhoods and near schools and parks. And there is a clear indication that road safety is an issue in our new community safety zones and across the city. Data, first time released now, from our automated speed enforcement pilot project in front of schools revealed that our 4 cameras led to 10,771 tickets being issued between July 13th and July 31st. Think about that for a moment. 10,771 speeding tickets issued as a result of individuals being careless and speeding in front of school zones. That's more than 2,500 tickets per camera in just over 2 weeks. And the real concern is the highest speed recorded during that period when a motorist driving at 89 kilometers per hour on Meadowlands near St. Gregory Elementary School. I hope this shines a light on how seriously we have to take road safety in our school zones and how essential the speed radar will be in addressing some of the dangerous behavior. And in fact, just to remind those who always label this a cash grab, 100% of the funds from these tickets go into community safety initiatives and programs in the city. Now, in our community, COVID-19 cases have been increasing steadily over the last week, reaching 37 yesterday, up from 25 the day before, which of course is a concern to me and to all of us. We just received the numbers for yesterday. They're down to 16, but we want to see those numbers go down to single digits and eventually to zero as a result of the vigilance and positive attitude people are taking towards social distancing, washing their hands frequently, wearing a mask, and other advice from our great officials at Ottawa Public Health.
This virus is spreading very quickly and we must remain vigilant.
The virus is very contagious and it's still amongst us. So with back to school, we have to remain extremely vigilant. That's why we're ramping up testing with the opening last week of a new by-appointment drive-through testing facility in the parking lot at RCGT Park on Coventry Road. More options for mobile testing are being explored and coordinated with our city and health system partners, and we've certainly heard loud and clear from our colleagues in all parts of the city they'd like to see more testing facilities in the extremities, in the east, west, and south end of the city. We're
also looking at other options to increase testing across the city.
Good time to remind everyone that the best way to keep COVID-19 under control is to stay physically distant and continue to limit the number of people at social gatherings. This is particularly true for college and university students, many of whom are now back in Ottawa reuniting with friends. Ontario's COVID-19 measures limit indoor gatherings to a maximum of 50 people and 100 people for outdoor events. This is a reminder that Ottawa Police and bylaw will be deploying significant resources to make sure everyone follows the COVID-19 prevention measures. Let's be smart, safe, and let's keep looking out for one another. We
must do everything in our power to avoid a second wave of COVID-19 in our community.
That's why City Council extended the mandatory mask bylaw until at least the end of October, and it may be extended further based on the status of the pandemic and the advice from Ottawa Public Health. We're also put in place measures to help our small business community make it through these difficult times. With the fall and winter sessions just around the corner, we realize that this may be another difficult period for local businesses. Again, I want to encourage residents to buy local and support small businesses in our community. Amazon will survive, but many of our favorite small shops, restaurants, and bakeries may not. And we have to do everything we can to help them get through this very challenging time. Think about those small businesses in your particular ward. You go to them quite often to ask for a gift basket for a charity fundraiser. You go to them to sponsor a local soccer or baseball team, and chances are they say yes to those requests because they are a part of the fabric of this community. Our team is working on a fall and winter economic recovery plan to keep businesses open and increase customer confidence in the safety of indoor business operations. We know that the shift to doing business indoors might not be comfortable for many residents, but I want to assure everyone that it is safe as long as we have the right measures in place. We
must continue to support our favorite businesses, the restaurants and stores that we use so often. These stores and businesses need our help more than ever.
With in-person visits, curbside pickup, online shopping, and deliveries, and we must continue to do so. I also encourage all businesses to continue to innovate their business models and practices to respond to the pandemic and adapt to their customers' evolving needs and preferences. And I've seen over the course of the last 2 weeks, as I visited many of your wards, some really innovative ideas by these small business entrepreneurs. And we thank them, and I thank them personally for inviting me into your restaurants and your shops and your services to see firsthand how you are fighting to survive staying in business and keep your fellow employees gainfully employed. As the municipal government, we don't have the same tools as our federal and provincial partners to help businesses directly, but we continue to use every means possible to help them maximize their capacity and generate revenue. That's why at today's council meeting, a motion is being moved by the co-chairs of the Mayor's Economic Partners Task Force, Councillors El Shantiri and Dudas, to extend our temporary zoning bylaw amendment for expanded patios on private properties until December 31st, and to waive patio fees for the winter patio season. I want to also thank Councillor Tim Tierney, Chair of Transportation, for his enthusiastic support of this initiative, which falls under his committee's jurisdiction. Staff already have delegated the authority to extend the right-of-way patio permits for the summer season, and as a result, restaurants wishing to keep their semi-permanent patio infrastructure until November 15th will be allowed to do so. Those wishing to continue beyond that point will be able to apply for a winter patio permit, for which patio fees will be waived if the El Shantiri Dudas motion is adopted today. I hope I can count on the support of all of our council colleagues to extend these important measures for our business community. J'espère pouvoir compter sur la...
I hope that I can count on the support of all council colleagues to extend these important measures for our business community.
Continue to work to support local businesses and work together as we navigate through these challenging times. Now, speaking of supporting our community, Ottawa lost its biggest champion and booster last week with the passing of Dave Smith. Dave was an incredible community builder who raised literally tens of millions of dollars for a wide variety of causes, including the establishment of the Dave Smith Youth Treatment Centre. I had the opportunity to visit Dave last week to thank him personally at his home for his lifetime of giving to our community, and I was honored when Dave's family asked me to speak at his burial service just a few days ago on Monday. I had the great pleasure of presenting Dave on behalf of the city, the key to the city many years ago as a small gesture of gratitude to a true icon of our city. My sympathies go to Dave's wife Darlene, who also the day before Dave passed lost her brother to cancer, his family, and his thousands of friends. I'll now ask Chair Eglai to say a few words before Dr. Etches provides her update. Then we'll do the consent agenda and then back to the regular agenda. Thank you. Merci. Councillor Eglai, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, colleagues, and a special good morning to Councillor Deans. Welcome back. Dr. Etches will again be providing the COVID-19 update this morning, but before she does, I want to touch on a few topics that have been top of mind for many of us. So far in our response to COVID-19, we've managed to keep case numbers low enough to avoid having our healthcare system overburdened. The upcoming flu season will present another challenge on that front. With that in mind, I wanted to share with my council colleagues that, as always done, Ottawa Public Health will be holding community clinics throughout the city this fall. What will be different, however, this year is that in order to maintain COVID safety measures, these clinics will be at fixed locations and by appointment. There will also be COVID screening, hand hygiene, physical distancing, and mask use requirements. Staff are proposing to run these clinics 7 days a week with extended hours during the busiest period in order to provide as much access to the vaccine as possible. OPH is working with key partners such as pharmacies to extend its reach to vulnerable and isolated populations, namely shelters and congregate settings. Lastly, staff are exploring new and innovative ways to deliver influenza immunizations, working with partners to promote the vaccine and increase coverage to reduce the burden of respiratory illness during the upcoming flu season. More details on this fall's influenza immunization campaign will be forthcoming. In previous years, certainly Ottawa Public Health has pushed the message that you should go and get your flu shot. This year, more than any other year, this is an important message, and this is something that everybody who can should consider doing as soon as they can and the vaccine becomes available. As you all know, areas within Ottawa with a high proportion of racialized communities and high material deprivation have experienced higher rates of COVID-19. One of the ways OPH is working to address this is through the development and dissemination of multilingual and multicultural resources aimed at informing and supporting those communities, including COVID fact sheets, multiple languages, multilingual mental health videos, and links to resources and services for newcomers and diverse populations. OPH has also created a page on its website dedicated to providing resources for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis community members. As I said, this is just one of the ways OPH is working to support these communities. I think we all have a role to play in helping disseminate these resources, and I would encourage all of you to do so through regular newsletters to constituents. Lastly, I want to touch on back to school. Many children have already returned to school. Others will be doing so in a phased approach over the coming days. As colleagues know, OPH has been working hard both internally and with our local school boards to make the return to school as safe as possible. I just want to take this opportunity to offer my best wishes to Ottawa school children and their families, as well as all the teachers and school support staff. Our hope is that we'll be able to continue to maintain the spread of illness to keep everyone as safe and as healthy as possible. Please check in with the OPH website regularly for updates and resources and tools for both parents, students, and educators. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Etches to provide her update. Thank you.
Bonjour, Quay. Hello, everyone. Good morning. And it's so nice to see you, Councillor Dean. Wonderful. I do have some slides to go through today. Je vais présenter une petite mise à jour.
I'll do my update.
The first slide, as usual, describes the epidemiology, the big picture of the situation in Ottawa. And I haven't previously highlighted the color, which I thought I would spend time mentioning today. It's a global rating. It comes from looking at the whole situation of people who are infected, the growth in those numbers, the outbreaks, our hospital capacity, our public health capacity. We do see that our numbers of people who are testing positive for COVID-19 has stabilized at a higher rate. The hospitalizations are stabilized, but we've had a growth in outbreaks in long-term care and retirement homes. I can speak to that more in a moment. We're still meeting our targets for follow-up, but I think I'll touch on schools in a moment. But I do expect that we will uncover more of what's out there in our community. And so the numbers of COVID-19, infections detected in children and school-aged youth will likely grow because we're now screening 160,000 people and 17,000 teachers, asking them to make sure it's not COVID if they have symptoms, and also in their households that's important to do. So it may be that we detect more of what is out there and are able then to do more tracing and stopping the transmission. The goal here is manageable level that allows us to have that balance between the work and the school that we need to engage in and protecting people from COVID infection, the severe outcomes especially. So when I say orange, I mean we can't relax. We're not red, where red would be, extremely concerning picture of hospitals being overwhelmed, but we're not yellow either. We've seen that it doesn't take much if we relax our physical distancing, our wearing masks indoors, our staying home when we're sick, we can get rapid resurgences. And so this is certainly about being alert and maintaining those behaviors. On the next slide, there is more to say about long-term care homes and retirement home outbreaks. Of course, top priority is preventing these outbreaks from happening. We are seeing improvement in that these outbreaks are declared when one staff person is detected to test positive for COVID-19, and that often is happening with surveillance testing or people who had symptoms and sought testing. And this is positive that we see the spread within homes is not happening to the same level in almost every case, though we are focused where there seems to be a challenge in a particular home. With our healthcare partners, the Champlain COVID Response Committee is looking at how to add in supports along with Public Health Ontario for infection prevention and control, support. The Ministry of Long-Term Care also, is responsible for the oversight of homes to make sure they have the adequate staffing, to make sure that the owners are increasing the supports on the ground for infection prevention and control. Ottawa Public Health is taking an approach of continuing on-site visits to prevent homes who have not had an outbreak to stay that way. We're continuing to monitor homes as we go, and this is, of course, always a one point in time on-site visit. That's why we have, the reliance on others to do their part. But really, I can assure you this is a focus of many to ensure that this situation doesn't grow into a more challenging situation. Et aussi, je pense c'est important de dire que SPO n'a pas encore identifié d'épidémie.
We haven't identified, yes, an epidemic.
Testing positive, either as a source or as part of an outbreak in long-term care homes or retirement homes. I'll go on to the next slide. And I hope Councillor Tierney is paying close attention here. We're really pleased to be able to add to the geographic reporting that we have been doing on where in the city of Ottawa we have the home addresses of people who have tested positive. We know that's not the same as where they were exposed, but there is some information about, what is happening, what are the risks for people in different neighborhoods, firstly at the ward level. So what we're adding at this point is information that shows not just a picture to date of the rates of COVID infection, but the numbers of people who have tested positive in each ward. And we're showing that over time. So the last 30 days and the last 14 days will allow people to see what the more recent picture is. There's also the ability now to filter, so the tables that are up, this is current on our website now, it's active. You can filter to look at, rates from highest to lowest, numbers of tests that are positive from highest to lowest. The next evolution in our geographic information will be at the neighborhood level, and that is going to be in partnership with the Ottawa Neighborhood Study. And so that will allow us to have more context for the numbers, to understand the different dimensions that are involved with different neighborhoods, and not just the COVID picture. We will need to take a careful approach to that data as well, in terms of not, we'll have to suppress data where there are small numbers, so as to be careful about any identifying information. Nous sommes ravis de nous associer à l'étude de voisinage.
We will do this in partnership with the neighborhood study within the various wards.
Councillor McKenney and others, have asked more about what is the picture? Where is COVID-19 coming from? Where are the exposures? We're continuing to add to our way our databases work to be able to pull out more information from the progress notes and that kind of approach. The linking of cases and contacts and locations continues. I wanted to give you a taste today of what we're seeing, the way that, when you have one person test positive for COVID-19, it can really spread quickly and be transmitted over geographical distance and multiple households. So I'll just take a moment to look at this slide, which is a real-world example, where on the top of the slide you have a group of 10 friends who were all attending a party at a cottage. There was one person who developed cold-like symptoms while at the cottage party and then tested positive on the return home. Subsequently, 7 of those friends tested positive for COVID-19, and those are the blue dots that are shown. The days are noted here because those are the days when people showed symptoms. They developed symptoms, and so you can see it actually happened very quickly. Within 9 days, one person with symptoms became 40 confirmed people who tested positive. And what you can see is that these friends went back to their own homes, and then, the infection spread to people who were in their homes, sometimes vulnerable populations, people who needed to attend emergency rooms for care. We also see that in the third row, these people also then attended, work and retail locations while they were communicable. There were situations here on this third row that included childcare. 2 situations where we did then have to close childcare, and we saw spread within the childcare settings. We did not see spread and confirmed positives in the retail locations. So those are depicted by the handbags or the shopping bags there. So I think, again, this is to underline that none of these people expected that their minor cold symptoms were COVID. And if there was protection like physical distancing, if people were wearing masks, then that would limit the transmission of COVID-19. So I really think that the take-home message here is that COVID-19 can spread rapidly, and we don't expect it, and we need to be COVID-wise, to continue the behaviors we know do stop transmission. I'm going to speak next about schools on the next slide. And, here again, the objective is prevent that transmission of COVID-19 by keeping it out of schools. So a big focus of ours, and I appreciate Council's help with this, is to make sure that we are emphasizing families, employees, anyone entering the school environment, visitors, use the screening tool that's on Ottawa Public Health website in many languages to make sure you check for those symptoms that could be COVID-19, that we want to make sure we rule out COVID-19 if you have those symptoms. It also is clear, if someone in your home has symptoms, we need everyone in the home to stay home until that is determined to not be COVID-19. And this is hard. This is hard for families, but it is harder to have schools have to close down because of transmission within the schools. And so we are asking families to do their part and really appreciate if there's hardship because people have to stay home. Again, this is where the city plays a role in emergency social services support. People can call 311 to be able to have support and discuss those options. There is the intention of the Ministry of Education to take on the role of reporting about the situation in schools. So while there was some confirmation by Ottawa Public Health about situations where somebody did end up testing positive who had been in the school environment, that information is meant to be on the Ministry of Education's schools website. What Ottawa Public Health will be focused on into the future is making sure we do that follow-up and the investigations, and if we identify an outbreak where there's school-based transmission, which we have not seen yet, then that would be what we are reporting on our website. Certainly, we know with the number of contacts and people needing to be tested that having options for families to be able to access that testing is critical. We're working with our healthcare partners to make sure that they are able to meet that demand, that they are looking at increasing the pediatric lanes at the different existing assessment centers, and they're willing to adapt to additional measures as needed. Wanted to mention around mental health in schools that our nursing supports to schools, our community school nurse group that's been supported by the province to be added to our team with federal money as well. We have hired 45 out of 45 nurses at this point, and so they are our resource. They are observing things in schools, answering questions, everything from making sure that there's a log book to track who enters the school, to advising on the lineups outside when parents are picking up or guardians are picking up children. So this is something I do think is adding to the support for schools on the ground. But the way we're working is to share the good ideas and the good practices that are happening, and to spread the information that nurses see in one school across the system. Even on Labor Day, we were speaking with all school boards about what we've learned about the assigned seating on buses being important to enable us to be more precise in who needs to be sent home to self-isolate because they're considered a close contact. And so you can see this is a rapidly evolving environment where people are continuously improving. So I'll go on to the next slide, which is to say that people also are asking me a bit about why Ottawa. Why are we seeing more, infections in Ottawa? Does it feel like the outbreaks have gone up more than in other places? I do want to take us back to what we saw with us here. We're the biggest city that went into stage 2 and then into stage 3 first. We are even larger when you consider the Outaouais population across the river, and we're very much one connected population. We see that when it comes to following up of situations where COVID was identified. People work and live back and forth. So the increase came just with the announcement of the opening of stage 3, again with the relaxations that we observed in social settings where people, might not have thought that COVID could be in their social network. And so, again, that is what works, to practice physical distancing, to wear masks indoors, to limit our contacts, to stay home when sick. And this is what we work with our partners across the river to reinforce. We're saying the same thing. We're working together, every week. So on the next slide, just to also underline this same message is we have been successful in avoiding the worst, but we know it was at a cost. Right, the shutdown of everything hurt people. It hurt, people in terms of income and employment, children in terms of their social development and support, and so I'm also getting questions about when would we go back, and when would we shut things down? And this is not the intention. The intention is to reinforce what works and to take more targeted approaches as much as possible. It isn't, on the business side that we're seeing as much as the risks grow, as much as within our lives, in our social networks. And so we each need to continue to do our part. Certainly, we do have more protections when it comes to congregate care settings now. We do have better access to testing, and these things will make a difference. That said, we know things can change quickly, and that's why, again, the partnership with the city, planning for worst-case scenarios is part of what we're doing, and I really appreciate the support of the city manager. So just to finish, we are also within our organization really continuing to have most of our team deployed. I want to highlight it has had an impact on our core services. So we really do maintain minimal levels, so only dental emergencies, only sexual health for services, clinics for people who work in the sex trade or who are homeless. We are not doing things like smoking cessation or injury prevention. We are only doing inspections of food premises that are at high risk or who have a history of noncompliance. It's the same with personal service settings. So I just appreciate the understanding of partners, again, where we can't do prenatal classes, we can't visit all the new parents we'd like to, that we have a network of partners in the community who are also stepping up to make sure that families are supported. So does bear repeating on the last slide que COVID est toujours dans notre communauté.
COVID is always in the community, and we'd like to remind all residents that it's in your hands.
To have some adaptation required again with the schools reopening. We are needing to prevent transmission not only of COVID-19 but influenza in the coming months. And so I just want to encourage us all to keep caring for one another, and I want to thank Council for your support. Merci au Conseil municipal pour votre temps aujourd'hui.
Thank you for your time today, City Council and City staff, for your hard work, and our health workers also, frontline workers.
To keep their protections in place and provide increasing services to our population. So thank you. Je suis ici pour vos questions.
Alors, merci beaucoup, Dr. Etches.
Thank you, Dr. Etches, and your team.
We have a number of members of council who have questions for Dr. Etches. City Manager Steve Kanalakis is here as well. He does not have a presentation today. So, Councillor El Shantiri, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Dr. Etches, for your presentation and your leadership. You showed the map, and those numbers were shown in the last couple of weeks. Do we know how many people have tested in those areas? Or is the number maybe because not too many people are tested in those areas? Like, is it based on testing, or that's what I'm interested in?
We do have a fairly stable and high level of people testing across the city. I think what you're wondering about is if that can be broken down of who's going for testing by ward. We don't have a way to pull that information out of the system, but we can talk to our partners who are running the assessment centers. I know there are other questions about who's being tested, and we're interested to see if we can pull that out in terms of other socio-demographic data as well.
Well, as much as I love the idea we have zero in West Carleton Marsh, but I have a hard time to believe that could be true unless we don't have too many people are making that trip all the way to Ottawa, because we've been asking all along we should have mobile testing. And I know this is out of your hand, but from day one, we had asked for mobile testing like they do it in the rural area, rural Ontario, where paramedic or other agency are doing the testing. And obviously, the Ottawa Hospital or the Link decide not to go that way, and they expect people to drive. We don't have public transportation. Some folks cannot drive and make the trip and wait half a day in the lineup. So I'm not sure if that number is representative of amount of testing happening or lack of testing.
Thank you, Councillor. I agree with you that these maps do not tell the whole picture, and I think that we need to interpret them with caution. They're the most important message for people looking at maps was that COVID has occurred and can occur across the whole city. And when it comes to access for testing, for those who are less mobile, they can call through their healthcare provider. There's a referral service to get access to mobile testing. You're right, it's our healthcare system that is working to increase options. We've seen some progress in a drive-through option, but we know there's more needed, and there are plans underway to add capacity in the east, west, centrally, and through other more distributed models. So there's no question that a primary care-based approach to access for testing is really, potentially most accessible for the population, and we have our community health center partners are working on this as well. So, the situation on testing continues to evolve, and I do appreciate that we want a situation where anybody who has symptoms is able to get that COVID-19 ruled out in an easy way.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great,
we're no further ahead today than we were at the beginning.
Councillor Egla, I see on the list, but do you have a question to public health?
I do.
Okay.
I do, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple. One is just a quick follow-up to Councillor Chantiri and his questions around remote testing. Dr. Etches, you alluded to the fact that the assessment centers, the testing services are run by someone other than public health. For those not around the table, so to speak, those who may be listening in, can you explain who the partners are that actually maintain and run the testing centers?
The Government of Ontario has tasked Ontario Health with running access to COVID-19 testing. Ontario Health has 5 regions. We are in the east, and so there's a testing strategy for the east of Ontario. And then when it comes to on-the-ground implementation in Ottawa and the Champlain area, that is overseen by the Champlain COVID Response Committee. So that includes all of the hospital partners, where you see the Ottawa Hospital leading one of the assessment centers with CHEO. You see the Montfort, you see the Queensway Carleton Hospital running others. These hospital leads are expanding. They're looking at growing other sites and more capacity. We have also under that Champlain COVID Response Committee structure the Ottawa Health Team led by multiple convening partners, but under leadership by community health centers, especially that Ottawa Health Team is looking at increasing access to testing. So it is Ottawa Public Health's role to describe what's needed, and our partners are working to implement this. And, I do appreciate the frustration. Everyone would like more access to testing. We're certainly aware of that, and I know people are working hard. The wait times have come down. There's a new booking system, which I think is being tried and hopefully will become more widespread. That booking system is run by the Ottawa Hospital. It's hosted on our website, but the system, the infrastructure, the program behind it is based on the Ottawa Hospital system. So, they are responsible for running how testing access works.
Thank you. The other question I have is around schools, and thank you for talking about that this morning. And if I'm a parent of a child in a school where someone has tested positive, whether that be another student or a staff member, can you set out what I can expect as a parent? Once that happens, what does public health do, and what can parents expect, and over what sort of a time frame can they expect those things to happen?
So Ottawa Public Health is informed from the labs if somebody tests positive in a school-age children, that is flagged, and we also collect the information about what schools children or teachers are connected to, and so that information we then connect with the schools to talk about what were the classes involved, and we need to verify with the person who's tested positive where they were, what their practices were. We need to verify with the school what protections were in place. All parents of students in a school, when somebody tests positive, will be informed that there was a positive in the school. That will be through a letter that is distributed by email by the school, but it's OPH that would have the content to describe the next steps. That letter will explain if their family, member was in close contact and needs to have more specific follow-up, that Ottawa Public Health will reach out to them directly, either through a phone call and also with an email letter that has more specific information for them that their child or youth should not attend school. So people will get that second notification if they need to stay home, or their child needs to stay home. What we also do is we have a do not attend list that the schools receive. And so far, experience has been that this has worked. So nobody who is on the do not attend list from the 5 situations in 5 schools that we identified over the last weekend showed up at school. So the timeline is as quickly as possible. As soon as we receive the lab report, of course, we want to do that follow-up and get the details from the person within 24 hours. The same with the follow-up with contacts within 24 hours. We know that people need to be informed right away about not attending school. And I can tell you we're looking at significant numbers. We hope that the learning from the weekend will reduce the number in the future as different practices are put in place. But we may well need to turn to more automated systems to notify families. So automated phone calls, emails, those kinds of things may grow in our toolbox. But we have absolutely the team that is meant to help each person who is a close contact and their family understand what they need to do. Family members in the house, just to underline one thing, the family members in the household of somebody who's sent home do not need to stay home. They can go to work. They can. The other siblings can go to school, unless somebody in the household develops symptoms. If somebody develops symptoms of COVID-19, then everyone must stay home until that's determined not to be COVID-19.
Just a quick follow-up to that. So if, again, for parents out there that are struggling a little bit with this, and I know that they are because we're all hearing from parents as Ottawa Public Health is there a convenient and easy-to-use checklist that a parent can use in the morning before they send their kids out to school and if so, how do they access that?
Yes, I encourage every family to look at our website about schools and COVID, where the top banner in a few places you should be able to easily find a screening tool that can be used daily to really verify, based on your situation in your household, if your children should go to school. It is Ottawa specific. I want to recognize that we are taking a more protective approach in Ottawa given the community transmission that we're seeing. There's a provincial screening tool as well, but we've spoken with our provincial colleagues about the rationale for a different approach in Ottawa, and so the tool that the schools are promoting, that we ask you councillors to promote, is Ottawa specific on the Ottawa Public Health website, again in multiple languages. There's also detail about what kind of letters of instruction will people get if their child is a close contact. So all of that is there for people to see ahead of time and understand what the direction will be.
Thank you for that. And just a quick thank you for pointing out the issues around providing core services at this time. That's going to be an ongoing discussion as we get to year end and as we enter the budget discussions for 2021. So thank you for highlighting that, flagging that, and also thanking our community partners for coming forward and trying to fill those gaps for us as OPH responds to COVID. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Kavanagh, please.
Thank you very much to Dr. Etches. Many of my questions have already been asked, but I do want to emphasize the concern I hear from residents about those who don't drive, that they can't make use of a drive-through clinic, and they're usually in vulnerable populations. So like Councillor El-Shantiri about the idea of having mobile units, it would be very helpful for seniors where we have large groups of seniors, and also vulnerable populations and social housing, et cetera. Is that possible to see in the future?
Yeah, I'm kind of going to repeat myself, but I will expand for vulnerable populations. There is the inner city health van that can go. It's mobile, can go to locations like congregate care settings where people may face barriers to testing, so that exists. Our partners across the system are looking at how to be more on the ground in communities with lower income, for instance, people who don't drive for sure. The work of Ottawa Public Health is actually also important because testing on its own and access to testing is not going to help us catch up and stop transmission of COVID. So what Ottawa Public Health is doing in lower income communities is making sure that we're working with community leaders, we're working with our partners, community and social services, again, the community health centers, so Ottawa local immigration partnerships, to make sure that communities understand what practices they can take to protect against transmission of COVID, to prevent those infections in the first place. Absolutely, testing needs to be there, but I'm just making the distinction between Ottawa Public Health role and what our healthcare partners are working on.
Okay, thank you very much, and I thank you for the work we've done on bringing protective measures into apartment buildings and condos. That has been very well received and very appreciated. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Councillor Brockington, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, everyone. Good morning, Councillor Deans, and good morning, Dr. Etches. Dr. Etches, again, just to go back to the schools, if a child is exhibiting signs of COVID and she or he goes home, the class remains open until a confirmed case of COVID is diagnosed, correct?
That is correct.
And then your recommendation to the school boards is that class then close down for 14 days?
It may be. I would say the majority of the time that may be the whole cohort. So the cohort may be the class. It may be others that came into close contact with that class. For instance, a teacher that rotates in, at lunchtime. We did have one instance already out of the 5 where we did not have to send everyone in the class home because people were able to verify that they kept physical distancing in place and that the personal protective equipment was worn by the teacher, and that the duration of time that somebody was in the classroom was very limited when they were potentially infectious. And so it is a case-by-case assessment of the risks in the classroom or beyond, but often it will be hard, especially in the younger ages, to make, to have confidence that young children have always stayed in their seats. But this is part of the investigation, why public health needs to take the time to find out about each situation uniquely and then notify the close contacts.
So that final call will be made by Ottawa Public Health, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and you've been an advocate for schools to return. You have clearly understood the damage that the number of months that the schools were closed has caused children in particular, and my worry is that there will probably be multiple cases throughout a school year within the same class of kids who may or may not get COVID, and just the number of times that a class may be closed in the same school year is going to be very disruptive, to say the least. So that's a concern.
Yes. Absolutely, this is not easy for families, and the more people can use the screening tool every day, keep people home when they're sick, the better. That will make a huge difference in terms of how much we need to then control for transmission in the schools. Still, we know with this virus there's some challenges because people can be infected without symptoms and communicable. So that is the future for now. We do know, on the whole, we're trying to keep schools open.
Doctor, just the issue of geographic testing comes up every update you provide us. Councillor El-Shantiri mentioned it today, and I saw a number of my rural colleagues nodding. Can we be polled by your team about what our needs are for testing so we have a united approach? When you're meeting with either Champlain or the Ottawa Hospital, no one from OPH has ever asked me what my needs are. I continue to send them to your team. I've sent them to Mr. Love. But, you know, rural is one part. Even in our city where we have seniors buildings, seniors who can't drive or don't drive, large social housing units that I have where I need testing teams to come in. They can't come to the testing centers. We have repeated asks for itinerant testing teams to come in, but is there a way?
I think that I'll raise this with the Champlain COVID Response Committee in terms of how they want to get more information from councillors about what you're seeing. That I can take back to them.
Okay, I appreciate that. Finally, my last question is, I've raised this with you before, our most recent conversation about mental health and making the city more aware of resources that exist, and of course reassuring them that struggles that they may have are normal. And can you give me any sense or update about what OPH has done since we last spoke about raising the bar on mental health support?
Yes, there's certainly a focus on building this mental health messaging and supports access to resources into all of our school-based work. That's a priority, and that's for families as well as students to be more aware of what's out there. We also know that the mental health system is adapting to COVID, and the mental health and addiction services providers continue to evolve their systems to have more connected care and coordinated access. So Ottawa Public Health is part of those conversations. We are looking with our police partners. Actually, we just had a meeting that Ottawa Public Health hosted with the Chief of Police and leaders in the mental health and addiction services system to look at how do we really change, the options for people in crisis and make sure people get the support they need. So there's multiple conversations ongoing about improving the system, promoting the services that exist, and then targeting, messaging to different populations that have different needs.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Suds, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a lot of my questions have already been answered by yourself through my colleagues. I do want to raise a question around, the mayor made in his opening remarks a statement around the need to assure safety of being indoors and the example of dining indoors. And, I think we've all spent the last number of months now under the assumption that patio dining was safest and not to be indoors as much as we can. So my question, Dr. Etches, is just, is it safe now for us to be back indoors dining? And if that is the case, what are we and what is OPH doing or planning to do to support that messaging?
Thank you, Councillor. I will never say something is safe. I can't guarantee that, but we will talk about what reduces the risk of transmission of COVID. And we've seen indoors, people are adapting, and the things that make a difference are the employees are wearing masks. Customers are wearing masks unless they're eating or drinking. The tables are spaced out. The number of people that can gather at any one table is reduced. I think the added piece around ventilation, that message is getting out there that the more fresh air and air exchanges in an indoor environment, the better. So these measures, of course, again, staying home when you're sick, they all make a difference in making the indoor environment safer. So it does come back to the basics, and if we practice those, we will see less transmission of COVID-19.
Mm-hmm. And I raise this because obviously, we're starting into the cooler weather, the fall, winter's not that far away. I think it's incredibly important that we're supporting our local businesses, including our restaurants. And I see that as being challenging moving forward. Given what you've just said, is there any intention to amplify this messaging as you've just laid out, so that the public understands what precautions they can take in order to be dining out?
Yeah, I think there's a good sort of targeted another stage to our messaging around moving indoors. I think I'll take that back to the team, that there's sort of what to do now that we're moving indoors to still limit COVID transmission. And by the way, Councillor, we did review our elevator posters, and they've been updated to reflect that some elevators do not accommodate 2 people at a time, and we've looked also at the messaging to employees in gyms. So thank you for continuing to raise questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that greatly. I just have one other issue I wanted to raise, and that was around some of the data from last week. I had noticed that we saw a decrease in the percentage of contacts that were reached within 24 hours from the goal of 90 to 85. And I'm wondering, as we see cases trend up, are you concerned about OPH's ability to meet that 90% goal, or do you have the necessary resources to be able to hit this target?
So we do have a plan for surge capacity and to continue to grow the capacity for case and contact management. That's partly drawing from across our team even more. It's partly looking at neighboring health units. It's looking at students, bringing back the medical students and the nursing students that we used in March. It's also thinking about the role of our city partners who are able to help us at times of need. The other thing I mentioned earlier is to automate some processes. So these are all approaches that I expect we will have to use. Absolutely, it doesn't take much. If you can imagine, if the number of people who test positive doubles. For a repeated number of times, it's hard to double our team repeatedly. But we do currently also use Public Health Ontario service for follow-up of routine contacts, and we'll continue to use all these tools at our disposal.
Okay, fantastic. I did have a question on testing, which you have answered. I would just like to reiterate. I think it was Councillor Brockington who had voiced, it'd be great for councillors to be able to have a mechanism to provide feedback on testing needs in our community. So, I thank you for your positive response on that as well. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Councillor DeRoos, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see Councillor Deans back around the table. Yeah, we'd like to see you basically in the City Hall, but nice to see you also virtually. Mr. Mayor, I have a few questions for Dr. H.A., but I know most of the question has been answered, but I also want to add my concern, and also to Councillor Shantiri and Councillor Sads and Councillor Brockington. The testing is the most thing that we've been getting requested, and we understand the process. And we know Councillor Iglai really highlighted a little bit on who's responsible for what, but for us, our only mechanism is to come to you at this format, so explain to you what's going on in our community and what is the concern in our community. And that's where because you advocate on our behalf. In our communities, what's happening is lots of people in my area go to Winchester Hospital, and they provide the same services. I know you're aware of it. But now winter coming and fall is coming, and there is some concern also. People have there's no mobility, there is no OC transport. So I will add my voice to my colleague to ensure that you looking after us in the rural area and in the south end of the city, to making sure we increase the testing, and we'll have those ability for those specific and small area that we'll be able to have even mobile or some kind of one day in every area. We really appreciate your advocating for us if you can, Doctor. This is my message to you today. My other thing is I really want to thank Councillor Turney for bringing also the inquiry about the community transmission and the interactive mapping. But do you have any idea when this will be based in communities, the numbers on communities will be out? Like, how long is that work going to take?
So the neighborhood level information, tied to the Ottawa neighborhood study, we expect within a couple of weeks. We're just working with the partners to make sure that they can upload the data that we give them, and that they can have the right protections in place to make sure that small numbers are suppressed.
Thank you, Doctor. I'm looking forward to that one too. And I really want to give you a little, I want to thank Councillor McKenney for her bringing the attention on how the transmission happening, and how I love that slide that you basically explained to us. And thank you both and everyone who works behind the scenes to make it available. Last week, you mentioned something in the last council meeting. You mentioned that you had no concern in restaurant and in bar or restaurant transmission. Are we keeping the track on? I know that now we're coming to different era. We're going to have schools, people going back to daycare. Are we going to keep track on the industry where we are really seeing increase and push some awareness or education? Because we don't want to scare people all of a sudden if we have 40 or 30 cases, and it could be really related to one small pocket or one small area, because our industry is vulnerable. We're opening the restaurants slowly and small businesses. We don't want to throw the scare. Are you keeping track of that, and you'll be able to share slowly with the community and with us on where is transmitting?
Yes, that's a short answer. What we do is we identify cases that are related to an outbreak, and we can look at how to make that clearer. The percentage, reported each day that's related to an outbreak is something that we report on weekly. So there are the supplementary reports on our website that have weekly information. It's very rich. It shows what percentage come from outbreaks versus community spread. We also can break that down by community-based outbreaks or institutional outbreaks that are more like the long-term care homes, retirement homes, the child care centers, schools. Those are on our website as well, more information about outbreaks. But you're right. We do want to be targeted in what we're talking about needs to happen when it comes to business. And so what I would just share right now is where we've seen outbreaks in workplace settings. It's been where people don't wear a mask indoors and there's no physical distancing. And that's a type of business, and so really the message to businesses is to look at your practices. What can you do to spread people out, and make sure in the workplace people are wearing masks when they're in shared settings, and that will make a difference.
Thank you, Dr. Hedges. I really appreciate all the hard work you've been doing in our community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Luloff, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much to Chair Eglai and Dr. Etches for your hard work on this. Diane, so good to see you again. I'm really happy to have additional capacity at Coventry Road at the drive-in site, but with the return to school, young children can't be tested there, so it doesn't help them out. Wait times are down across the city, but they're still high. The booking system for Coventry isn't working properly. We're hearing a lot of complaints about the inability to use the system, or it's timing out before they get an appointment booked. It doesn't really do anything for people that can't drive, as been mentioned by my colleagues already. And the current testing centers in the city close at 3:30 or 4 p.m. I had a COVID scare about 2 weeks ago. I called telehealth with my symptoms. The registered nurse that I spoke with told me to immediately go to the emergency room and get tested, that the symptoms were enough that I shouldn't wait for a testing center the next day. Obviously followed their advice and went to the general hospital, waited for 5 hours, got the nasal and throat swab. Please, everyone, just wear a mask and social distance, because I'm telling you, it's not the most comfortable experience ever. They did a chest x-ray, and I received my results back, which were negative, thank goodness, in less than 24 hours. So really pleased with the service that I got at the Ottawa Hospital when I was there. Totally understand the Ottawa Hospital is running these sites, but OPH and Parks and Rec are helping to identify the need and the potential sites. And it's been over 3 months that representatives in the East have been working to identify these sites, and yet still we don't have a site announced in the East End. We need to help increase the capacity for children, and for those who don't, if you don't mind in your advocacy work, please help us in the East End and the rural areas to increase capacity, because right now I feel like, despite the great work that they're doing, the Ottawa Hospital is failing us on testing in the rural areas and the East. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry you had a scare, and I'm glad you look well today. And thank you for doing your part of trying to make sure it's not COVID. This is a burden for sure on everyone. So I do hear what you're saying about that challenge to access. We don't want people to have to go to emergency departments. I would ask maybe something else then of all councillors is to talk with the primary care providers in your communities about what they can do to offer testing in their offices. That really is the most distributed model that we have across the city, and I think that could add to the system where the hospitals are only going to have so many fixed sites that they can run, and to get more on the ground points of access, it will take primary care as well. But I will continue to. I'll follow up to make sure that the CCRC creates a mechanism for councillors to continue to inform them.
Great.
Thanks, Doctor.
Thank you. Councillor Fleury.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Dr. Etches. Of course, you're the target of our questions. We have many questions today, so I'd like to start with a vote of thanks. You're doing fantastic work. You're informing people. You're there last week. We saw you in French language schools offering advice. Thanks very much. You're playing a role as a provider of information. You're also reassuring teachers, parents and kids alike. So I'd like to thank you. I have two questions for you. The first question deals with the issue of schools once again. I was a bit confused by information sharing. Sharing of information when someone in a school tests positive. Could you perhaps give us a summary, a very brief summary of what parents should expect? What they should expect when a child has come into contact with someone who's infected with COVID-19? Answer. Do you want me to speak it in English or get the answer in French or in English? It's your choice. First of all, a letter to all parents of kids in the school will be sent out confirming that there has in fact been a positive case. and any parents who need to take action will be asked to put their kid in quarantine, and they'll be advised of in a further letter, well, rather not a letter but an email.
Get a first letter that confirms there was a positive test in the school, and then it will say in that letter, if your child was in close contact and you need to take action to keep your child home, you will get a second notification. That will be an emailed letter and likely a phone call as well from Ottawa Public Health, so that would explain, do not send your child to school. The school also gets a do not attend list, and so that's another backup, so that if someone does come to school, there's a way to still exclude the children.
Yeah, that can easily become unmanageable when all the schools are up and running, just by the volume of some of these. I wonder, is there not a proactive approach? I go back to the slide that you presented around the cottage and how quickly an interaction spread into other households and impacted vulnerable folks. I wonder, why not be a little more proactive, and as soon as there is a case in the class, to force quarantine until all those students and teachers are tested? Can you maybe give us a reflection?
So the proactive work that is extremely important, that every parent and teacher and staff and schools do, is the screening every day. That's the proactive piece, of keeping it out of the schools. When there is somebody who tests positive, I'm not sure that there isn't much of a delay. It's about identifying who are the close contacts. That's the only time that we take, is to identify who are the close contacts. Right away, all parents will get a letter and explain what's happening, and the further instructions should come very quickly. These are processes we'll get faster and faster at, but it takes time to confirm, was the child actually in school when infectious? What places was the child, what protections were in place? We have to do a little bit of investigation, because it may not be the whole class, for example, we found that needs to be sent home. It could be part of the class. So there is some investigation, but the target is absolutely to inform with that second letter as soon as possible.
Okay. And then my final question relates to, I guess, our combine or collective concern around testing facility and specifically outreach. We've reached out, a number of us have reached out directly to the Ottawa Hospital to convey our concerns on their approach to the baseball stadium, specifically around limited access for those coming on transit by bike or walking. I think we need to come at this together, not east versus west versus urban. I think the mobile approach would be an equalizer in all of this discussion. So instead of specifically outreaching and advocating in our own health center, can we not unify and make an official request as it relates to mobile testing for all residents of Ottawa?
So I think that what is clear is that the CCRC is a forum to be able to hear from councillors collectively about the different interests and the common interests and ideas. I do know that the testing strategy includes both fixed sites and mobile access. Mobile access is less efficient, but it is necessary. So we will make sure that the CCRC sets up a process to take all these questions, so you don't need to bring them to City Council meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Gower, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I wanted to thank you for the update on the automated speed enforcement. Over 10,000 tickets issued in just the first few days is it's an astounding number, and I think it's a good data point. We hear about concerns about speeding all the time in our communities, and there's a good indicator that it is a big problem in our city. I have a question about back to school, but it's not for Dr. Etches, it's for Mr. Kanellakos and his team, and it's about traffic safety. We have received a lot of concern and inquiries from parents about the volume of traffic in school zones, partly because buses aren't fully up and running, but also partly because parents are reluctant to put their kids on the bus. And I'd like to know from staff what is being done proactively to monitor the traffic situations around schools, to respond, to mitigate any potential safety concerns.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, a lot of things have been done. I think John, I don't know if John's on or who's replacing John because he had to step out for a transit issue. Who's on for John?
Yeah, Steve, I'm here if you need me.
Oh, thanks, John. So I know John had sent me an update yesterday because we've been discussing this with the senior leadership team. So John, maybe you can give a more detailed update than I certainly can in terms of all the efforts your team has been doing. Thanks.
Certainly. So, Councillor, we've got the integrated team mobilized. We were working all summer long with the school boards, and we recognized there was going to be an increase in traffic. So our emergency operations center at Loretta has been stood up, and that entails having police there also so they can deploy resources if we need to in terms of traffic operations and so forth. We've got extra inspectors out, mobile patrols, along with our supervisors for buses. So they're all eyes out on the school boards. But more importantly, we have direct access from the principals into our command center telling us of situations. For example, yesterday we had a few bus overloads, so we quickly deployed a few extra buses at one of the schools. Totally agree with you that traffic around the schools is a very dynamic environment, and so we're adjusting on the fly. I think the full court press is coming in terms of the staggered starts. We're keeping an eye on tomorrow, Friday, and early next week. I think that's when all the issues will come to bear in terms of what some of the challenges will be. But we've got extra resources ready to mobilize and work with the schools and OSTA and our own staff in terms of addressing issues and deploy everything from barricades to street management, logistics, and things like that. And if you have specific issues or hotspots that you're hearing about, please feed them right into Phil Landry right away. He's got a quick response team that's ready to go.
So just as a practical example, I was out at a school last week in our community, and it was pretty obvious there was an issue with cars turning in and out into the school parking lot and sidewalks being blocked, and something like it reminded me actually at the end of a Red Blacks game or an Ottawa Senators game, where there's a short period, 15 to 20 minutes, of a lot of traffic and the need for some direction by a police officer or someone trained in traffic control. I'm trying to understand whose responsibility that would be, I guess from a budget point of view. Is that up to the school to pay that resource, or are Ottawa Police able to do that on an ad hoc or continuing basis, or is there city staff who can play that role? Where does the responsibility lie?
Yeah, so we're tracking all those additional costs. We're going to sort that out in due course. Our approach right now is that we're concerned about the safety aspect because you're absolutely right. We're seeing illegal movements. We're seeing parking on sidewalks and so forth. The first response is to get it addressed so it's not a safety risk. The second approach is do we need to do some temporary or additional signage and monitoring and so forth? But rest assured, Councillor, we're tracking all those costs and we'll sort it out as we go through. There's no doubt about it. There are increased costs in that area also.
Okay, thank you for the update, and I'll be following up with staff on a few things in our ward. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you, Councillor Gower. Councillor Shirelli.
Thank you, Your Worship. My cardiologist has asked to see me this morning. So according to the rules, I'm just letting you know that I have to leave the meeting right now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Leeper, please.
Thanks, Mayor. A couple of items. First, John, thank you very much for the update on the schools. I was expecting the bit to be quite a bit more of a stuff show than it was. I'd reached out to some of the principals. I know you've done a bunch of work with them, and so far so good. So pleased with the proactive work that you've done with the school community to try to mitigate some of the anticipated traffic impacts. I have a couple of updates I'm looking for, one from John and also from Dr. Etches. Dr. Etches, I'm just wondering, I think I had heard earlier, maybe last week, that the contact app that is available has been helpful, and I'm just wondering if we can get that unpacked a little bit. I think the comments were made as part of a media avail. Can I get a clarification from you when you're talking about primary care as an avenue for testing? Are you referring to the CHCs, or is there the possibility that doctors in private practice might also play a role? And then, John, can I get an update from you on how we're doing with compliance with the mask rules on public transit? I continue to get notes. My son was out probably too late a few nights ago with very little mask wearing on the train he was on. Can we get an update on that? So, Dr. Etches, how is the contact tracing, the contact app going?
So this is an app that's created by the federal government, COVID Alert. Yes, we know that we have at least once seen that the app alerted somebody that they had been in close contact with somebody who had tested positive, and then they went for testing and they also tested positive, which would not have been detected without the app because the person didn't know that they had, were carrying the virus. The data, I know people have asked, the number of downloads in Ottawa, I don't have access to that. That actually isn't reportable through the federal system. They're not tracking people's addresses. So we don't have that information. But I would say we do know the more people that use this app, the more useful it will be. What it requires, though, is that when somebody does test positive for COVID-19, they need to enter it into the app that they've tested positive, so then they can be, in a system where others will get an alert if they've been close to their phone. And that process may not be happening 100% of the time. So we're looking at, again, this is our testing partners to make sure as people are accessing their test results, they're also getting that prompt to make sure that they are entering that into the app. And so these are things that, we're promoting to make sure that we can get the value out of them. This app is particularly useful. I mentioned it in my letter to young people returning to college and university, where there's a gathering where you might not know everybody that you come into close contact, with a group where you can't name every contact you had. These are the settings where it can be useful. And so do encourage everyone to continue to use COVID Alert, and if you test positive, to make sure that information gets into the app.
Thanks. And with respect to testing in alternative settings, you'd asked us to start talking to some of the primary care sector.
Yes. So the CHCs with the Ottawa Health team are looking at how to make testing more accessible to lower income neighborhoods across the city. But I do mean private primary care providers, nurse practitioners, family doctors' offices. Initially, there were great barriers to be able to provide COVID testing within their offices because people did not have the support to have masks and PPE, the visors, the gowns if needed. And this has changed. There is now access to personal protective equipment for primary care providers. Each office is different in their capacity to isolate people who have symptoms, but it is worth a phone call to check. Does your family doctor offer COVID testing in their office? Because they might. And this is something, again, that increases the options for the population.
Is that something the health officials are working with the CMA on to try to encourage doctors in private practice to begin offering this?
The CMA is a national organization. I'm not involved in that level of conversation, but I am engaged with the local primary care providers in different ways in Ottawa. We're talking about access to influenza vaccine as well. So making sure that all of our partners in the healthcare system are doing their part will help across the board.
That's helpful. Thank you for all your work, Dr. Etches. And John, how are things going on transit?
So specific to your question on the masks, we're doing two things. TransLink out in Vancouver just recently reported on compliance rates. We're we're working with their staff to determine how did they do that, because it's a lot of buses, a lot of trains to monitor. So we're interested in knowing what that compliance rate number is. But secondly, both the mayor and the chair have asked the exact same question you have, Councillor, and we're planning an enforcement blitz with a heavy education approach for early October. We wanted to get through the school phase-in period, and then we're going to bring something forward, and we'll let council know about it. Obviously, it'll be one of these situations where we're going to tell everybody that we're going to be out monitoring. We'll probably be issuing warnings, not fines, and also having additional masks to proactively prop people up with a heavy message that everybody's got to do their part. We do have some hot spots where we have problems, and we're going to start narrowing that down and doing some education and continued reminders to everybody.
Well, thanks. That effort, I would just encourage you to make sure that it's, around the clock. I think sometimes the adherence to the mask rules can get a little bit sloppy after late at night, we'll say. Yeah, you've mentioned that, and you're bang on. It's by route and by time of day is what we're seeing, the patterns. Okay. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Meehan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to follow up briefly with Mr. Manconi. Mr. Manconi, when it comes to tracing for the drivers who have tested positive for COVID, can you tell us where they're picking up the virus? Is it in the workplace? Is it at home? Do you know?
So we have some assumptions. I'm going to turn to Dr. Etches because I have to be very careful with the confidentiality aspect of it. It's a great question, Councillor, and I don't want to sidestep it, but I look to Dr. Etches in terms of what we can share publicly. We have an integrated team with Dr. Etches. They work at an incredible pace, hence the reason we issue those memos out very quickly, because we want to do our part to protect the public. So, Dr. Etches.
Generally speaking,
So generally speaking, it's Ottawa Public Health that follows up with people who test positive, including bus drivers, and we do the investigation, not the employer, and we look at all of the possible sources of exposure. So some are community-based exposures. Some are people who drive buses are clearly picking up the infection from their close contacts in a social setting. Others, we don't have that clear alternative source, and so we had been looking at what was happening in the workplace, and that has led to just reviewing all the measures about wearing masks indoors, keeping distance, just like any other workplace. And so I think that those are the steps we're going through, and it's really a mix is what we're seeing.
Okay. Dr. Edge, just as a continuation of this line of questioning, there's a lot of people are confused. I mean, testing positive for COVID, does it necessarily mean you're going to become sick?
No, we're still gathering data as a world, across the globe, about what is that percentage of people who have a COVID infection and no symptoms. It seems like when we do surveillance testing in the long-term care homes, it's about a third of staff that don't initially have any symptoms when we do detect the virus. And it is then, if you do a very rigorous history, and are you sure, didn't you just feel a bit tired? We don't ask leading questions like that, but you can sometimes find a very mild symptom. And sometimes people go on to develop symptoms later. So they were in the pre-symptomatic phase when they were showing signs of the virus, but not yet of the illness. Okay. So it can be both, and we don't have firm percentages on that, but we know this is why this virus is so hard to control.
Okay, and I know privacy is the utmost concern. For those people, the 13 people who are currently in hospital, can you just tell me, how sick are these people? We haven't had a death in Ottawa for a long time. I mean, there's a lot of hysteria about this disease, and as there should be, not hysteria, but concern. But realistically, most of our deaths have been in long-term care homes, right? And people who get sick get better.
That is correct. Most people who are under age 70 will come through, an infection with COVID-19 virus without requiring hospitalization. Of those people who are hospitalized, I think it's about 10% of the confirmed cases at this point have been hospitalized, with more of that initially, fewer hospitalizations now as a percentage. And that is because now we are seeing younger age groups, and it isn't just a firm cutoff at age 70. The risk actually increases as age increases. And so really with more of our cases being in people under 40, that's linking to a picture of less hospitalization, which is good, as long as it stays out of older age groups where the risk of death is higher. So the hospitalizations then, what we're seeing is the number of people requiring intensive care, admitted to an intensive care unit is also very low. That's been about 10% of the hospitalizations recently have been the picture.
Any children?
Very few children have been admitted to hospital. I'd have to double check on the numbers at this point, but I think maybe just a couple of people have been hospitalized who are younger, like school-aged. Usually teenagers.
Any characteristics that are similar of the people who end up in hospital?
Well, we know the risk factors are other underlying medical conditions. So whether it's heart trouble or lung trouble or other, even hypertension and obesity are risk factors. So these are things that are being seen again across the world.
So we can help ourselves in many cases and do preventative and everything that's.
Yeah, physical activity is good for mental health. It's good for physical health. It's one of those things that really makes a difference in our lives. If we can put aside 30 minutes a day to be active, walking, is really a good place to start. This is a good time for sure. People feel anxious. They feel isolated. I would encourage people to continue to get out for daily physical activity outdoors. It's good for many reasons.
Try to treat their lungs well. Thank you, Dr. Etches. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Tierney, please.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I do want to thank Dr. Etches. You've taken much valuable time. You spent a whole half an hour with me with statisticians. We walked through a whole bunch of stuff, and I really appreciate that. And I've been holding my tongue for about a week now, knowing that the Ottawa neighborhood study and how those maps would start rolling out. So very excited about that. 103 versus 23 is a big difference. So I'm really looking forward to see when they roll out. And I believe the question was asked when they would roll out. It said approximately 2 weeks, which is great. I'm very excited. I was actually kind of giddy about it. What about the frequency of the data updates? And forgive me, I should have asked before, but I wasn't thinking about it. How frequent will that data be updated by now?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we're working on the technical side is because of the small numbers, that there's very little change from most neighborhoods from one week to the next even. Most neighborhoods might have one or two cases often change, and that can really skew the rates around very quickly. What we've no pun intended, what we've mapped out so far is that we would look at monthly updates at the neighborhood level, but that's still part of the technical conversation.
Okay, so I really look forward to it in a couple of weeks, and I just want to thank you and your team, Ashley, the chair, for really engaging on this, as well as I had an outbreak at one of my institutions. You guys were right there, and thank you for working with the Ottawa Hospital to make sure we can assist the parents that were quite concerned. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Tierney. And our last speaker I have on the list is Councillor King.
Thank you, Your Worship. And it's great to see Diane back. I know that we had some brief conversations, and it's just wonderful to have you back around this virtual council table. I have just one quick question for Dr. Etches, which really follows up to some of the conversations that some of my colleagues have raised, and that she has raised around asking family doctors to engage in more testing. Of course, we know that there is a challenge with a lot of our residents simply having a family doctor. So I was wondering if there were any conversations about expanding the testing capacity that we have. We've had discussions around ensuring that mobile testing does come to neighborhoods, especially vulnerable ones, and that allow for a walk-in accessibility or accessibility through active transportation. But I'm wondering if there is a conversation about enhancing testing through the use of pharmacists in the city or throughout Ontario. So I don't know if there's been any discussion around that, if there's any advocacy work that we as elected officials can do, or if there is dialogue amongst public health officials about the use of pharmacists' offices for testing.
I am aware that this concept has been discussed at the provincial level. So I think it would be a question to provincial colleagues about any progress on making testing available through pharmacies. To be able to safely offer COVID-19 testing, people need to have the appropriate personal protective equipment, and they need to be able to isolate and clean, between patients. So there would be limits for sure, given different setups in pharmacies, but there may also be possibilities. So this is something I do believe is being discussed at the provincial level.
Thank you for that. And just to follow up, I want to echo the sentiments of all my colleagues. Thank you for the tremendous work that you've been doing and that public health has been doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Etches. And Dr. Etches will be joining me and others for our press conference after council meeting. So we appreciate all of your time today, Doctor. So on to the consent agenda. Committee reports, Finance and Economic Development Committee rapport numéro 16, Comprehensive Legal Services report for the period January 1st to June 30th, 2020. Carried. Item numéro 3, demande Riocan Management, Centre commercial visant l'adoption d'un règlement d'exception à la loi sur les jours fériés dans le commerce de détail. Carried. Okay. Item 4.
Please.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Fleury. Councillor Fleury, sorry, I didn't see your hand there. Go ahead. So do you have a question?
Can you hear me well?
Yeah, go ahead.
A quick question to economic development team at the city. I've had conversations with you guys in my area and wondering, I'm supportive of the nature, but I want to make sure that all BIAs are equal in this. So wondering if we can simplify the process and submit these types of requests going forward.
So here's is Mr.
Good morning,
Gillis.
Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, go ahead.
My apologies. We can take that under review. The process is heavily regulated through the provincial RBHA, but we can take a look at it and see if we can simplify the process for BIAs moving forward.
Okay, that satisfy you, Councillor?
I think to support our small business community, it's important to offer an equal approach to all BIA areas on this matter. I will be supporting this request.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Engelai?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to reiterate what I don't sit on the committee, but what I said at the last meeting, and I'm not going to be disingenuous about this. Even if we weren't in COVID times, this isn't something I would be supporting. I think it puts employees in an untenable position of trying to decide between pleasing their employer and giving up valuable family time with their loved ones. And I don't think that's a position we should be putting people in. But COVID gives it an overlay, I think. We've heard, and for those who voted in favor at the FedCo meeting, I'm going to give you an opportunity to reconsider that vote, and a legitimate one. There is a lot of new information that's come in since you made that vote. We've heard from Dr. Tam that there's a real concern about the rising number of cases right across the country. We heard from the Premier just in the last couple of days that they're putting a hold on any increased access or changes to businesses over the next couple of weeks. And they haven't even ruled out moving back to phase 2 as an option if things continue to show increases across the province. This isn't about being for or against business as far as I'm concerned at this point, and I don't even think it's really about supporting local businesses. Tanger is full of multinational corporations, and yes, there will be some work made available as a result of the additional hours, but I don't think it's actually going to create that many real new jobs. So I think the question we all have to ask ourselves in the current climate. The other piece, of course, that's new information is Gatineau has raised concerns about their levels and doing increased testing. And we heard from staff and from Tanger management that one of the things they want to do is they want to make themselves more attractive to shoppers from out of the city, such as from the Gatineau and Quebec area. So I think the question we need to ask ourselves is it's about balancing the risk, and we have to ask ourselves, is the risk that we're now facing with this, is that worth the discounted pair of sneakers that you're going to get on New Year's Day? I think that's the question you really have to ask yourself as we go forward. If you really want those sneakers, you can get them online. It's available. You can do that. And so, again, as I started, I'm not going to lie. I wouldn't have supported this in any event. I didn't support the last request we had for this around Bank Street, and my position hasn't changed philosophically on that. But I think in the current times, in the current situation, the current circumstances, caution should be exercised. And if we are going to have this vote, let's have it at a time when we have a bit more stability in terms of the numbers, a bit more stability in terms of where we're going in responding to COVID and knowing where we are. And again, this is not about being anti-business or anti-local business or anything else. I think we should be supporting our local businesses. We should be doing everything we can to keep them vibrant and alive and keep them safe for residents to shop in. And I just think, rallying around to bring shoppers in from out of town at a time when spread and numbers are high across the province and across the country, I'm not sure this is the time to be having this discussion and making this decision. So I'll just leave it at that. But again, I certainly won't be supporting it.
Okay, we passed this, and we're going to have to come back because it's obviously not part of the consent agenda, so we'll come back to hear from others. Item 4, Wellington West Business Improvement Area Boundary Adjustment, carried. Item 5, COVID-19 Economic Recovery Update, mise à jour relative de la reprise économique pendant la pandémie de COVID-19. Council received this report. Received. Item 6, motion City BIA Governance Working Group. Councillor, I have a motion seconded by Councillor DeRuz with respect to the membership of the committee. I think everyone was asked for their thoughts on that. On the motion, carried. On the report as amended, carried. Planning Committee Report number 28, rapport numéro 28 du Comité de l'Urbanisme, zoning bylaw 388 and 400 Albert Street, 156 and 160 Lyon Street. Carried. Okay. Item 8, development charge complaint 130 Britannia Road, plainte relative aux redevances de management 130 Chemin Britannia. Accept. Carried. Carried. Accepted. Item 9, zoning bylaw amendment, modification de règlement de zonage 195 Promenade Huntmar et partie de 2499 Promenade Palladium. Carried. Item 10, application for demolition of 347 Gilmore Street and alteration of 278 and 280 O'Connor Street, properties located in the Centretown Heritage Conservation District, designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Carried. Item 11, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment 278 O'Connor and 280 O'Connor and 347 Gilmore. There's a Harder Gower motion, I believe a technical motion on visitor parking space. I believe everyone has a copy of the motion. It's I believe they left something off the document. It's on the screen now. So on the Harder Gower motion, carried.
Carried.
On the report, committee recommendation as amended. Carried.
Carried. Mr. Mayor, I will dissent on the report. Councillor McKenney.
Okay, thank you. Zoning bylaw amendment 65 Acacia Avenue, modification au règlement de zonage 65 Avenue Acacia. Carried. Carried. Item 13, zoning bylaw amendment 2070 Scott Street and 328 Winona Avenue. Carried.
Carried.
Mayor, I'll dissent on that one, Councillor Leeper.
Councillor Leeper. Item 14, modification de règlement de zonage 339 et 343 Rue Gloucester. Carried. Item 15, Treasurer's Report on 2019 growth-related revenues, that the committee receive this report for information. Carried? Received. Transportation Committee Report number 10, rapport numéro 10 du Comité des Transports. Councillor Tierney, do people, I think some people, Councillor Fleur, you want to speak on this matter? So we'll come back to that then. Item 17, installation of safety enhancements on Bank Street Canal Bridge. Councillor Tierney, did you have a comment on that with respect to consultation of the BIA and OSAG?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Just to highlight, just direction from Councillor Menard and myself to continue to work with OSAG and the BIA during the design and development process of this. Thank you.
Okay. So that's just a direction, it's not a motion. So on the report, carried. Bulk consent agenda. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the bulk consent agenda? No. On the bulk consent agenda as presented? Carried?
Carried.
Okay. So we'll go back to the item that was sort of held just a few moments ago. So those people who wish to speak after Councillor Egli, if you can put your hand up. Councillor Hubley, go ahead. This is just for members of the public.
Thank
this
you,
is
Mr.
on
Mayor.
the Tanger outlet issue. Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have two concerns with what Councillor Egli said. One, we can't be supporting local business and at the same time publicly saying to people, go buy it online instead of going to a local store. The messages contradict each other, and so I want to make that clear that what we're being asked to do here is support a local business that provides hundreds of jobs locally, and all they're asking for is what the glebe has already been given, the market has already been given, and other locations. Secondly, there was a reference made in Councillor Egli's comments to cases related to retail, and I thought Dr. Etches had said that that wasn't found yet in any contract or contact tracing, that we weren't tying cases to retail. So I just want to clarify what the chair of Ottawa Public Health was saying about the concerns with a retail location from a COVID perspective.
Mr. Mayor, my recollection is I didn't specifically speak to retail. I said cases have arisen. Dr. Tam had raised concerns about cases rising, as had the Premier. I didn't specifically say in a retail setting. My point was bringing people in from different jurisdictions while we're seeing a rise generally across the province and the country, I don't think makes a lot of sense. That's the point I was making. It wasn't related specifically to retail.
Okay, thank you. We were having a discussion about retail, so that's why I thought that's what you were doing. Okay, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I have made my points. I think we need to support local business here. Yes, this is not about trying to bring people in from other locations at this time, and likely not until after COVID is well under control or being properly managed would we be going out looking to attract tourists to anything, let alone retail, in the city. So it's all about giving them the tools to work on a level playing field with other parts of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Menard, please.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor, and I just want to thank the Chair of the Board of Health for his comments. I think we should be listening to him on this issue. This would allow opening on New Year's Day, Family Day, Victoria Day, Canada Day, Labor Day, and Thanksgiving. And so we should be asking ourselves, why we have holidays. They're intended to allow individuals to celebrate or commemorate an event, tradition, culture, or heritage in Ottawa, or religious significance. And so they're also days of rest, time for families, time for friends. The employees of these businesses are often precarious workers, more often than not working in retail and food services. And so we degrade our traditions in pursuing this direction. Labor Day was the first Monday in September, has been a statutory holiday in Canada since 1894. It originated in the first workers' rallies of the Victorian era, and Canada Day originates obviously in 1867, and on June 20th, 1868, Governor General Lord Monck signed a proclamation that requests all Her Majesty's people across Canada to celebrate July 1st. Thanksgiving was celebrated by Indigenous peoples in Canada annually through a fall harvest that predates the arrival of European settlers. It was also celebrated by Samuel de Champlain with extensive history in the Ottawa-Gatineau area in the 1600s. The celebration common across Canada by the 1870s, and in 1957, Thanksgiving was proclaimed an annual event and holiday. I wanted to talk about public health for those people on the Public Health Board and all of Council. Numerous studies have found that taking these regular holidays lessens your risk of dying and minimizes the risk of heart disease. Taking regular holidays also helps reduce stress, which can lead to a variety of health problems like obesity, depression, and anxiety. And so, Mayor, I think when we expand these exemptions, we gradually degrade the health outcomes of workers, and we pull at the threads of a just society, and we ignore our history of tradition in favor of consumerism. And I think we need to be voting against this measure. Thanks.
Councillor Sides, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to my colleagues for their thoughts on this. I struggle to think of this as a COVID issue. This is an application that lives for years to come. It's a decision that we are making now irrespective of COVID. The province will dictate whether these businesses are open in the near term during COVID, during the pandemic. Regardless of what we decide here, that decision goes to the province, not ourselves. So I don't view this as a decision with that lens today. I view this as a decision of whether this is the right fit, whether we want to support these employees. I know Councillor Menard has shared concerns on the other spectrum. Well, I would present that this is also valuable employment that people need, and is the Tanger outlets in and of itself is a major employer. It is also a major economic driver in our region. We might not want tourists today, but I can assure you there'll be a time in the future where we'll be scrambling for them. And this is a driver of those tourist dollars into our city. So I think it's short-sighted to not consider that at this point in time. You know, I just this morning when I reviewed Stephen Willis's update with respect to employment, you know, retail has been hit very hard. And retail has had in Ottawa a net loss of 7,000 jobs over the last few months. So, I implore everyone to support this. I think we need to have a broader view of the impact of this on our city and on our residents in the longer term. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Leeper, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I can't vote for this either. I think Councillor Eagle has made a number of compelling points. These stat holidays are the days when, and many of us have worked retail, those are the days that you're going to have off. Many of us have booked provincial campsites, and you really need to book a campsite months and months in advance. And there's only a few days in the year when you know that you're actually going to be able to get together with your friends and family, and those are the stats. The legislation does have a tourism criteria that exempts some businesses from the Act, but I am very hard pressed to consider that the Tanger outlets are a compelling tourism draw, and it does put the areas that we say are tourist areas at a disadvantage with other areas that can't open at the same time. We've got 2 BIAs in Kitchissippi Ward. We've got Wellington West and Westboro. I would imagine if we start taking a very loose interpretation of a tourist area, such as we have to do in order to include Tanger in there, that in fact all of our traditional main streets should be considered tourist areas, and that's not the intent of the statute that allows this. So between needing to give workers some guaranteed days off every year when they know that they'll be able to get together with friends and family, and to try to adhere to the spirit and the intent of the statute, I hope that my colleagues will not support this requested exemption. If we do want to start opening everything on stat holidays, then it's up to us to put pressure on the province to give us a different statute that makes that possible. I don't think we're adhering to the intent of the legislation if we pass this today. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councillor. The last speaker I have on the list is Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think this timing of this is terrible. We're sending the wrong message. We're just coming out of situations of COVID-19, and this is about encouraging people from travel further to an area. And I think that this is something perhaps we could look at further down the line, but this is problematic in terms of the timing and the messages we're sending out. Yes, the province has regulations, but we have control over this situation, and I think we should take some leadership on that rather than just wait for the province to tell us what to do all the time. We have a choice, and we can wait on this until it makes it more acceptable. But frankly, I find it problematic to work on holidays in the first place, in my own opinion, so I still have an issue with it. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple other people have added their names. Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. Mr. Mayor, I wish my colleague will take a moment to read Bill 148 and the modification and protecting the staff. So for someone who ran a small business for 32 years in the city, I can tell you staff were happy when council said short holiday, they get paid double and they were treated well. But I find it ironically, we work so hard with the task force the mayor creates for economic development, and then publicly we say, oh, you can buy things online, and I find it disheartening because those people who are paying rent and who have staff in those stores, they need all our support, not to encourage people to buy online. I think Amazon is going to survive, but I'm not sure about those small businesses. They're going to survive. We heard quite a bit of those small businesses will be hard-pressed to see if they can make it through the year. So I will be supporting this, and I hope my colleague will support that as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Moffat, please.
Thanks. I just wanted to briefly add, I think obviously Councillor El-Shantiri has a lot of experience of running a small business in that, and I think, for myself, I worked in the retail hospitality sector from the time I started working until November 30th, 2010. The following day, I became a city councillor. In that, over those years, I worked a lot of stat holidays. I remember working Christmas Day at Brook Street Hotel, bartending to a hotel that was empty. But it was a time that those are things that I expected in that industry, and I felt that I always had the right to have that day off. If I wanted it, I made a choice to work on those stat holidays. It's a reality in that industry that we accept when we work in that industry. That, you know, the days I worked at Golftown, you know, Boxing Day, being there at 6 a.m. because we had a massive blowout sale that day, and we had to be there first thing because there'd be a lineup outside the store. It's just something I accepted. When I worked, I didn't get paid that well, but it's a job that I had. I enjoyed it, and I worked there. You know, I think it's interesting. You know, people talk about the timing. The timing's a funny one too. If the timing's so concerning, this application came in before COVID. This application is not about COVID. If the timing is so concerning, just move a motion to defer implementation to July 1st, 2021. Pick a date. You know, move a motion, whatever. I'd probably support that. Ultimately, it's not about COVID. It's not about right now. It's not about the next holiday. It's in general. It's the same with Rideau Centre. It's been open for years on stat holidays. So this is for, as Councillor Studd says, this is for well beyond right now. It's from well beyond the next year. But also, stat holidays pose an interesting challenge during a pandemic. I think back to the Easter long weekend and just how busy the stores were and the grocery stores were on that Saturday. You had the days in between the holidays, and just how exceptionally busy the stores were and how much more of a challenge that actually created to keep people distanced and to keep people safe during what was almost peak COVID time, in terms of really understanding what was possible and what was going on. Giving stores actually flexibility to be open on stat holidays during a pandemic could allow them to manage their flow better in terms of operating, especially when it comes to the grocery and retail sector. And just some comments. I do support this. I think I've supported it in the past, and I do believe as a former retail worker, as a former bartender, as a former, you know, retail manager, that we had ample opportunity without repercussion to have holidays off if we so wanted. But there was always enough people willing to work those days. Thanks.
Councillor McKenney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I felt that I needed to weigh in a few comments that have been made. I can appreciate that many of us have worked in retail and what that experience is. And I have no doubt that Councillor El-Shantiri was a generous and fair employer. And most of our small businesses are generous and fair employers. However, you know, unless you've been a single parent with kids at home, unless you've lived in poverty, you know, most of your life and continue to, and work in retail, and then are asked to give up holidays, Family Day, Labor Day, with your family, with your kids, and unable to say no to working on those days, I think it's difficult to put yourself in that position. But that is the reality. And you know, from what I know of Tanger, they're not a small business. I represent 5 BIAs in Somerset Ward. And this, you know, continuing to open up this to other areas and to larger employers does not in any way help our small local businesses. It actually will harm them. So it is going to have the opposite effect, and it will cause harm to people who really do need our protection to ensure that they have safe and fair employment across the city. So for those reasons, I won't be supporting the motion today the same way I haven't in the past. Thank you.
Councillor Sudds, you've spoken already. Is it a point of order? I see your hand is up.
I just wanted to point out that a number of the businesses at Tanger Outlets itself are local businesses. Absolutely, there's lots of brand names. Granted, those are licensed.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. That's I'm not sure.
You've spoken already on this, so thank you. Does anyone else who hasn't spoken wish to speak? Councillor Dudas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to point out, I'm going to be supporting this motion. We're talking about this not being a timing matter, but in fact, this is a timing matter. We as a council are talking out of both sides of our mouth. We're saying support businesses and keep people employed, and yet we're now making a decision to close what is a destination, a place that employs people, that has a mix of small businesses, locally owned franchises and businesses with larger businesses. So I also want to point out that we just carried and received a report in respect to our economic status that said that tourism in our city, we've lost approximately $1.4 billion. I mean, this is phenomenal in terms of us having this conversation. Although not all of us might choose to go shopping as a tourism destination, lots of people tend to go down to Syracuse or go to other locations to go to outlets. It's their way of spending money and enjoying, time with their families. So, there are lots of very valid points to this. There's certainly a conversation about ensuring that people that work in these places are able to take and spend time with their families. But right now, we need to also focus on economic recovery. We need to keep people employed so that they have the choice next year as to take those vacation times off, that they still have a job to go back to. So I fully support this, and I think that we need to look at it from an economic standpoint, an employment standpoint, and a tourism standpoint. And I think that this is the perfect timing to approve this motion.
Great, thank you. Councillor DeRuse, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be very brief. I just want to finish what Councillor Sudds was trying to say, and I totally agree with her, because I've been in this mall, in this Tanger Mall, multiple times, and there is a lot of businesses, even though there is a major names and some major brand, but there's a lot of it employs lots of people in the community, and there's lots of small businesses inside that mall. And also, fundamentally, there is some councillors, they cannot support this, and I understand that because from principle perspective, but to use this as it's a COVID thing, I think that's a little bit outside the scope. So let's not use the COVID pandemic for that vote, because Councillor Moffat and many other councillors highlighted it. This application came before, and we're doing this is for the next 4 years to come. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to the item? So let me offer a couple of comments. First of all, under the Retail Holiday Business Act, it defines a tourism area. This meets that criteria. Right across the street, literally, is the Canadian Tire Centre, which welcomes 2 million visitors a year. This is very much a tourism destination. Secondly, this is all about freedom of choice. If you support the proposal, you'll give these hundreds of employees the right to access time and a half pay, or they can choose to take the day off. If you vote against this, you're taking away their right, the employee's right, to determine what's in their best interest. I've met a number of retail workers over the last couple of months, and their biggest issue is they're not getting enough hours. They want more hours at their place of employment because they lost so many hours during the time their employer was shut down. The unemployment rate in Ottawa now is about 10%. We've seen a net loss between March and this month of 24,900 jobs. And in the retail sector, which was hardest hit, 11,500 jobs of that 24,000 were lost. So it may be easy and flippant to suggest you want to buy a new pair of shoes, you go online. I don't think the people who sell shoes in Ottawa are too happy with a member of council suggesting that they go online to buy their product. We want them to get into the shopping malls like Billings Bridge and Place d'Orleans and Herringate and so on. We want these businesses to survive because they're the ones, as I said in my opening remarks today, they're the ones that sponsor the gift basket. It's not Amazon that's giving away gifts like that sponsor the baseball team in the Glebe Little League or Frank Ryan Park. These are individuals that have a stake in the community. And the last count I had was there are 11 locally owned or local franchises at Tanger Mall. So it's not just a big box store. There's a lot of local businesses, whether it be Cafe Aramosa, Beaver Tails, Sweet Escape Candy, and so on. So this is a tool that we have to help businesses. The employee has the right to refuse to work on those days. That's in the law. But most employees, as I think Councillor Moffat pointed out, do appreciate the fact that they're going to get time and a half and they're going to have an opportunity to bring in a little bit more money to support themselves and or their families. So I would urge members to think long and hard about the importance of doing whatever we can during this difficult time to encourage people to come and shop locally in the East End, the West End, the South End, the downtown core, and recognize that there are a number of areas, the Glebe, downtown, Rideau Centre, Byward Market, that do have this designation, and it's worked quite well for them. So this is really about freedom of choice, about giving employees the opportunity to decide whether they want to work an extra day that will pay them more money than they'd normally make, or whether they want to spend it with their families. And I would encourage you to support this request to support local business people and local employees. So on the committee report, yeas and nays, please.
Councillor Tierney.
Yes.
Councillor Hubley.
Yes.
Councillor Luloff.
Yes.
Councillor Deans.
No.
Councillor Gower.
Yes.
Councillor Harder.
Yes.
Councillor Sudds.
Yes.
Councillor Leeper.
No.
Councillor Brockington.
Yes.
Sorry, Councillor, can you repeat that?
My vote is yes.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Eglai.
No.
Councillor Meehan.
Yes.
Councillor Moffat.
Yes.
Councillor Dudas.
Yes.
Conseil Cloutier.
Oui.
Councillor Kavanagh.
No.
Councillor DeRuse.
Yes.
Councillor Menard.
No.
Councillor El Shantiri.
Yes.
Councillor McKenney.
No.
Councillor King.
No.
Councillor Shirelli. Councillor Fleury.
Oui.
Mayor Watson.
Yes.
15 yeas, 7 nays.
Okay, that item carries. Next item that was held was item 16, STO Transit Study for Gatineau's West End integration with Ottawa. Étude de transport collectif pour le STO. Councillor Tierney, you have a motion, a technical amendment, seconded by Councillor Leeper. If we can put that on the screen and ask you to introduce the motion, please.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's in front of you, and maybe I'll just go to the therefore be resolved, if that is okay. It's all contained within the memorandum anyway.
Okay, go ahead.
Therefore be resolved that September 8th, 2020 memorandum to Council from the General Manager of Transportation Services be amended to the document 6 for the staff report. Be it further resolved that the report be amended to remove the reference to Sparks Street Tunnel Portal and being the site of the victims of Communist Monument.
Okay, thank you very much. So questions and comments? We can just get my screen up so I can see whose hand is up. Okay, so Councillor Fleury. Do you have a question or comment on either the motion or the main report that's before us? This is really receiving the interim report.
Yes, I'll be just speaking to the status. I'm happy, and I want to thank staff for updating the report and for Mr. Manconi and DVG's memo following the committee meeting. I think it's important information that we need to possess. I recognize further analysis will be conducted and a report for approval will be coming in front of Transportation Committee in November. But like in a relationship, I think that we need to be very direct with our neighbors and our partners in Gatineau in highlighting our keen concern. And I wish that we were firmer on identifying options that are not feasible or realistic for us in Ottawa. I hope that the discussions from Transportation Committee allow our staff to reflect on committee's concerns as it relates to some of those impacts. And I believe out of the two options that the Spark Street underground option is the least disruptive and the most favorable to residents of Ottawa. So I'll leave it at that. I would have hoped for us to get ahead of it and inform our neighbors of our intentions and of our concerns. I hope that the staff report in November will do as much.
Okay, thank you very much. Merci, Conseiller Fleury. So on the Tierney-Leeper motion, carried?
Carried.
And that we receive this report. Received?
Received.
So, Councillor El Shantiri, if you would move the motion to adopt reports, motion portant adoption de rapport, seconded by Councillor Aglai, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report 15, Finance and Economic Development Committee Report 16, Planning Committee Report 28, and Transportation Committee Report 10 be received and adopted as amended.
On the motion, carried? Carried. Motions of which notice have been previously given. Motion dont avis a été donné entièrement. I have a motion seconded by Councillor McKenney. And I'd like to take a moment to thank Nick Schiavo and Davy Sabarin and their teams at No Conversion Canada and Capital Pride for bringing this important issue to the attention of City Council. Conversion therapy is a sad and harmful reality that many Canadians, young and old, still face in many communities when they come out of the closet to reveal their true sexual orientation or gender identity. Our staff heard it during their consultations, which included a discussion with the survivor of conversion therapy. And I want to thank them, Tony and Valerie and their team, for their thorough research and analysis of the issue, which helped shed some light on the legislative and jurisdictional context that governs the matter. Un gros merci à Tony, Valérie et toute l'équipe pour leur travail.
Big thanks to the team for their solid work on this file over the past month.
Kenny and I empathize with the victims of conversion therapy and the extreme trauma they have gone through. Staff's review has determined that the reality in Ontario is municipalities are not the right level of government to crack down on this terrible practice. When staff looked at cities that had introduced bylaws elsewhere in Canada, they determined that, unlike Ontario municipalities, Vancouver had the legislative authority to outright ban a type of business. In the case of Edmonton and Calgary, these cities moved to regulate through business licensing, which is largely symbolic and a futile effort, as conversion therapy is no longer offered in broad daylight by businesses, but rather in secret and under the guise of counseling or support groups. On a more positive note, staff noted that the existing protection in Ontario offered by Bill 77, which I believe was introduced by Sherry DeNovo, MPP, the Affirming Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity Act, which was adopted in 2015 to protect minors against conversion therapy. The bill amended the Regulated Health Professions Act to ban amongst licensed healthcare professionals, quote, any treatment that seeks to change the sexual orientation or gender identity, end quote, of a minor. But more importantly, staff's assessment revealed that this practice is a disturbing and serious one of a criminal nature that accordingly should be legislated by the federal government, which has unfettered jurisdiction over criminal matters. Subsequently, cases of conversion therapy would be addressed by police authorities who have required authority under the criminal code to intervene and prosecute, which our own bylaw officers do not have. These legislative efforts to crack down on conversion therapy are already underway at the federal level with the introduction on March 9th, 2020 of Bill C-8, an act to amend the criminal code, conversion therapy. Unfortunately, this legislation did not progress following the arrival of COVID-19, and it only passed first reading in the House when Parliament was prorogued on August 18th. That is why Councillor McKenney and I are bringing forward this motion this morning to do 4 things. 1, denounce conversion therapy as the harmful practice that it is. 2, request that I write to the Prime Minister of Canada, the Minister of Justice, the Attorney General, and the Minister of Diversity, Youth and Inclusion to express support for Bill C-8 and ask for its quick reintroduction when Parliament resumes on September 23rd. 3, encourage anyone who has experienced conversion therapy to seek the mental health supports they need. And finally, 4th, encourage those who may have been victims to conversion therapy to report any related criminal activities, sometimes associated with conversion therapy, like kidnapping and forcible confinement, to report that activity to the Ottawa Police Service. Conversion therapy is a troubling and harmful practice, and I look forward to engaging with our federal counterparts in a very meaningful way to ensure that they give it the attention it deserves and pass this legislation quickly this fall. I want to conclude by thanking Councillor McKenney for their support and for working with staff and with my office on this. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. And Councillor McKenney, Seconder, if you'd like to offer some comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to my colleagues in considering this motion. I think that it's really important to just to add to the comments that Mayor Watson made, this is not about parents talking to their children about who they are, how they identify in terms of their sexuality, or gender. This is a dangerous practice. It's been happening forever. It makes people sick. It causes suicide in youth and in others. It is criminal, quite frankly. And, we live in a city where we can often forget the ill effects of homophobia. We proudly fly a flag at City Hall. Council comes out to, pride parades. Overall, the city is a very open, diverse city. But since tabling this motion, most of the messages, vast majority of the messages that I've received have been very positive. But there have still been some exceptionally hateful messages that I've received over the past 2 weeks that really underline the need for protection for people who are vulnerable to conversion therapy and to extreme homophobia. I don't happen to be one of them. I happen to have a family and friends and colleagues, that I have support of, but that's not the case for everyone. And that hatred is out there. It is alive and well. A lot of it is anonymous, but I can tell you a lot of people put their names to some of the messages that I received over the last 2 weeks. So I do thank you all for considering this. Thank you, Mayor Watson, for asking me to work with you and to second this motion. I'm very happy to do so. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor. Est-ce qu'il y a des autres personnes?
Anybody else?
Carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Thank you. Merci. Motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure. Motion exigeant la suspension des règles de procédure. Councillor El Shantiri has a motion that I referred to in my opening remarks, seconded by Councillor Dudas, with respect to small businesses and the patio issue. It's timely, obviously, because we're coming into the fall season. So on suspension, carried.
Okay.
And Councillor El Shantiri, if you'd like to introduce and explain your motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dudas. As we work together at the Economic Development Recovery. So first of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your trust in both of us and working together with the team of staff and outside partners. We had a great discussion all along. Also working with the staff. This motion, Mr. Mayor, is prepared by staff and staff in agreement with the intent of this motion. So I'm going to so I have to see, I don't see the whole motion on my screen, but now I see it. Okay. So, Mr. Mayor, if I can go to where, at the bottom, where, can we scroll it down?
Just there we go, to the be it resolved.
So the council approved the following. One, waive the monthly rate for right-of-way patios and annual permit fee for cafe seating permit for the winter patio season, November 1st, 2020 to March 31st, 2021. However, continue to collect the permit application fee of $62 to ensure that permits are acquired. Two, amend the right-of-way patio bylaws such that for the winter patio season, November 1st, 2020 to March 31st, 2021, an applicant to a cafe seating program may request unlimited amount of cafe seating permits to expand beyond the 4-table, 8-seat cap, where space exists at the discretion of the general manager of PIDE. Three, fund the estimated $3,000 in lost revenue from within planning, infrastructure, and economic development operating costs. Approve the enactment of an amendment to a temporary zoning bylaw amendment 2020-223 for outdoor commercial patio and pop-up retail store to extend the duration of the temporary zoning to December 31st, 2020. Also, I'd like to thank my colleague, Councillor Turney, who's the chair of Transportation Committee, and working together with Councillor Harder and Stephen Willis on this motion. And I'm looking for your support. This is to help our folks in the small businesses, small cafe, to continue the patio for in the winter time. As we heard, Mr. Mayor, and if I can take this opportunity also to ask my colleague and encourage them to do what we did earlier, supporting the small businesses, promoting the small local businesses, buying gift certificates from those small businesses. Mr. Mayor, we're coming to a winter time when the patio, outdoor patio, is going to be a number of days left for. And we need to encourage our residents to join inside those places, inside those restaurants. They have the toolkit. Every place I visit with my wife and family and others has been followed the rules. Staff been doing a great job because they like to be employed and working. So I hope we continue what we started in early in the year, promoting and in our columns, in our social media, supporting the small businesses and buying those gift certificates, encourage people to visit them because they are following the rules. As we heard from Dr. Atchis, they provided with a toolkit, and majority of those places, they want to stay open, and we want to help them to continue to stay open, especially in the winter month. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Leeper, please. Councillor Leeper.
Sorry, Chair, my button isn't working here. Anyways, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to be supporting this, but I do want to raise with respect to cafe seating. We've had a number of new delightful cafe seats all along Wellington and Richmond. They've given people a great option for enjoying some socializing with a coffee outside and meals and drinks. But the winter is challenging. Our traditional main streets are not well plowed. There are too many days when the clearance is poor, and oftentimes in the winter, because of the freeze-thaw cycles we have, we get conditions of buildup of ice that make it extremely challenging to try to maintain an accessible sidewalk on our traditional main streets. What I would like to hear from staff is a commitment that before we provide permits to some of the cafe seating that is on the sidewalks, that they will consult with the local ward councillor to talk about those. The 2-meter clearance may be theoretical in some places because of the presence of snow, and we don't want to create accessibility issues for kids trying to get to school, people trying to get to class, people trying to shop and support our local small businesses. So if I could hear from staff a commitment for consultation with the local ward councillor around sidewalk cafe seating on the sidewalks.
Yeah, could I just offer a comment as a result of the work the Mayor's Economic Partners Task Force is doing? That exact issue has come up in terms of enhanced clearing and removing of snow, and we're expecting to come back to Council sometime in the next month with a series of recommendations that would include the consultation with the ward councillor as well. So that's you've read our mind, and it's underway, and staff have agreed to that.
So staff will consult with ward councillors for extending cafe seating on the sidewalks?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. That's great.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Dudas, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very pleased to second this motion, and I'm going to point out that this is once again providing our businesses with another tool in the toolkit. It's not going to be perfect in all locations. We are a winter city, and in recognition of what Councillor Leeper mentioned and some of the back and forth by other colleagues on council, very valid points. Accessibility, sidewalk clearing. We're entering a winter season. It's more so about giving our businesses the chance to make the decision if they wish to continue with the patio season, if they want to continue to serve customers outside. Not everyone feels comfortable eating inside, and I'm happy that Councillor Studs had asked for OPH to provide more clarity and more information to potential customers who wish to do so. But we have to be willing to be flexible in terms of providing our businesses with everything they need to stay open. And that's really what this comes down to. So I'm very pleased that this is on the table. Once again, the task force has been doing a phenomenal amount of work with our partnerships with Ecobia and the Ottawa Board of Trade and RGA and all the different groups providing input. And I wanted to thank all the councillors for providing their thoughts as we go through this process in trying to identify opportunities to support our businesses. So, I'd encourage my colleagues to support this. We'll work through the nuances of it. Once again, ward councillors should definitely be consulted to ensure that pedestrians could access spaces safely. But this is a tool. This is a tool that will be available to our businesses to help them survive this pandemic. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Conseil Fleury, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
To thank the mover of the motion. I think it's an important discussion to have ahead of the winter. A lot of our restaurant businesses open this summer with very limited capacity, and patios allow them to reopen, to lose less money, is what I've heard from many of the businesses in my area. The indoor capacity provisions, which sort of happened as we reopened, were helpful, but many fear the rise in number and the fear of potential clients. So this is an important move, but I will be supporting the motion, but I want to understand clear from, I believe this is Mr. Curry or Mr. Willis's effort. I want to understand better what is our expectations as it relates to snow removal of those businesses. I also want to understand what happens in streets where you have a number of on-street patios. how do we support the entirety, but what if there's not a common approach to the area? And then the third point relates to some of the businesses, based on the street closures, have taken the entire sidewalk. So how do we address that in the transition to winter?
Mayor, thank you for the questions, councillors. Certainly, city staff are balancing both our goals for economic development, but also ensuring that our pedestrian clearways now in the winter will remain clear. So I'm going to start off with an answer to your question, councillor. I'm going to ask my colleague Lila Gibbons to follow up on the specifics with respect to the operational side. Any permit that we give this winter will include a standard clause which obliges the permit holder to clear their patio or terrace from the snow and to not dump it on the city clearway. Where we can have a one-off agreement with our permit holder and our winter operations crews, we'll certainly look to do so to help them out and also to ensure our clearways remain clear. They will be 2 meters as they have been all summer long. It is more of a challenge, obviously, to keep a clear 2-meter clearway throughout the winter months, but on a one-off basis, we'll be working with each permit holder on doing just that.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question fully, Councillor?
Yeah, I'll follow up offline, but thank you for...
Merci, conseiller. Councillor Suds, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Councillor El-Shantiri and Dudas for bringing this forward. I wholeheartedly support it. I just wanted to reiterate a comment earlier that I raised with Dr. Etches, because I think it's not only an OPH mandate, but also incumbent on the city and our economic development folks to assure residents that this is a safe activity now, again, to be visiting our our restaurants. I think we've been programmed for a number of months now to avoid doing so. And if we are truly committed here to supporting our local businesses, including our restaurants, we need to make sure that we get that messaging out and how to do so safely. So thank you very much.
Great. So, excuse me, on the El-Shantiri Dudas motion, carried. Thank you. Next is a motion requiring suspension of the rules by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Harder, with respect to flag protocol and Children's Cancer Awareness Month on suspension. Carried. Councillor Moffat, if you'd like to introduce your motion, please.
Thank you so much. So whereas on May 11th, 2017, as a result of a controversial flag raising at Ottawa City Hall, a comprehensive review of the city's flag protocol procedures was conducted to establish objective guidelines by means of which flag raising requests are considered. And whereas on October 9th, 2017, a revised flag protocol procedure was enacted to include the following criteria, namely that an organization seeking to have its flag flown on the city's property must have a mandate, program, or activity that is directly connected to the municipality by way of a relevant funding or partnership agreement, or it aligns with relevant days of awareness, celebration, importance, commemoration, or promotion as recognized by the Ontario provincial government and or the Canadian federal government, or a ministry or department thereof. And whereas the month of September is recognized as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month by the Canadian Cancer Society, however, it does not meet the objective criteria in the revised flag protocol procedures, as it is not officially recognized by the federal or provincial government or a ministry or department thereof. And whereas cancer is the leading cause of disease-related deaths for Canadian children, with 1,700 cases diagnosed annually, and with some cancers being terminal upon diagnosis, therefore be it resolved that Council petitions the federal and provincial governments to formally recognize the month of September as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, and be it further resolved that in conjunction with the Canadian Cancer Society, Ottawa Council recognizes September 20th, 2020 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. So I know that we did proclaim this month as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. It seems to be that while I completely understand why we created a new policy for flag raising, that this is something that got caught in that. And I don't think we wish to pick and choose which cancer awareness groups we promote. I know Councillor Harder is proudly seconding this motion, and I think it's important. I don't think anyone can really properly explain the feeling when you have to tell a mother that we can't raise a flag because it doesn't fit the policy. It's such a small gesture in the grand scheme of things. And I think it's important that we get through this and find a way to formally raise that flag when the request comes in, so that we can stop saying no to such a petty thing to say no to in the grand scheme of things. Thanks.
Great. So on the motion, carried. Does anyone else have a motion requiring suspension of the rules of procedure? Notice the motion for consideration of subsequent meeting. Avis de motion par examen en réunion subséquente. Councillor McKenney, seconded by myself, with respect to commemorative naming of Boucher Square. Councillor McKenney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Seems to be the Watson-McKenney day for motions. I'll read it out because we are online for those listening in. Whereas on July 24th, 2002, City Council approved as amended the commemorative naming policy, and whereas in keeping with its powers to set out in the Municipal Act 2001, Council may assign a commemorative name by resolution notwithstanding the provisions included in the commemorative naming policy, and whereas residents of the City of Ottawa have relied on Boucher's Fruit Market at the corner of Elgin and Waverly Street for 70 years, and whereas the past 3 generations of the Boucher family has run the market since 1946, and whereas the Boucher's Fruit Market has been a prominent fixture in downtown Ottawa, offering a wide range of diverse food, and whereas the history of the Boucher's Fruit Market is remembered and treasured by many residents of the City of Ottawa, and whereas this proposal was circulated to establishments along Elgin Street with overwhelming responses in support of the proposal, therefore, be it resolved that Waverly Square, located at the corner of Elgin and Waverly Street, be renamed the Boucher Square, and be it further resolved that an appropriate stand and plaque be installed in the square displaying the name Boucher Square and including a brief history of the Boucher's Fruit Market contributions, and be it further resolved that all costs related to the production and installation of the stand, plaque, and subsequent event will be funded through the Councillor's office. Thank you.
Great motion. I think we all have memories of going into that story. So much was packed into it. It was quite unbelievable, a real institution here in Ottawa. So we'll debate that at our next council meeting. And thank you, Councillor McKenney. The next notice of motion is by Councillor Dudas, seconded by Councillor Cloutier. Councillor Dudas, if you'd like to introduce your motion, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whereas in response to a recent council inquiry with respect to cyberbullying, city staff indicated Ottawa City Council has established codes of conduct setting out ethical behavior expected of elected officials, appointed citizen members of boards or commissions of the municipality, and city staff. And whereas these codes of conduct could be applied to a variety of violations, they are not specific or tailored to address the types of cyberbullying or attacks that can occur on social media forums. And whereas the inquiry response presented examples at the municipal, provincial, and federal levels of government of social media guidelines or interpretation bulletins that specifically specify how an existing code of conduct applies to social media use and behavior. And whereas in the inquiry response, city staff indicated that should council request to have more clarity respecting how the code of conduct for members of council applies to social media behavior, that the Integrity Commissioner is prepared to respond to a direction from Council to produce an interpretation bulletin to specifically address social media behavior. Therefore, it be resolved that the Integrity Commissioner work closely with the Office of the City Clerk to review the existing codes of conduct with the goal of producing an interpretation bulletin to specifically address social media behavior by councillors, board, and commission members for inclusion in the 2018-2022 midterm governance review report.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Cloutier is seconding that motion, so we'll deal with that at the next meeting. Does anyone else have a notice of motion for consideration of subsequent meeting? No. Notice of intent, avis d'intention, notice of intent from the Ottawa Community Lands Development Corporation to hold the annual general meeting of the shareholder at the City Council meeting scheduled for September 23rd, 2020. Motion to introduce bylaws. Motion portant présentation de règlement. Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Myself, seconded by Councillor Iglar, that the bylaws listed on the agenda under motion to introduce bylaws 3 reading be read and passed, and that the following bylaw be read and passed in accordance with the motion approved at today's meeting. A bylaw of the City of Ottawa to amend bylaw number 2020-2023 entitled A Bylaw of the City of Ottawa to amend bylaw number 2008-250 to temporarily allow relaxation of regulation relating to outdoor commercial patios and pop-up retail stores to extend the duration of the temporary zoning to December 31st, 2020.
On the motion, carried.
Carried.
Confirmation bylaw, Councillor.
That the following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceeding of council meeting of September 9, 2020.
Carried. No written inquiries from the clerk. Councillor El-Shantiri, adjournment, please.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Mayor.
Carried.
Carried.
And the media availability will take place at 1:20 p.m. Pour les membres du média, ça va commencer à 1h20. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much. Merci.